Dr. Rachel Torres pressed her daughter's face against her shoulder, shielding Lily's pale skin from the afternoon sun as they hurried across the parking lot. The shelter's waiting list had grown again. 3 weeks minimum, the coordinator had said, her voice kind but firm. Rachel's hands trembled as she unlocked their 1998 Toyota Camry, the back seat crammed with everything they owned: garbage bags of clothes, Lily's medical supplies, the wide-brimmed hats, and UV protective clothing that kept her daughter safe from the sun that could kill her. Inside the car, Rachel lowered the sun shades and checked Lily's skin. No redness, no burns, just the same porcelain white complexion, pink eyes blinking behind her prescription sunglasses, white blonde hair tucked under her protective hat. "Mama, where are we going to sleep tonight?" Lily asked. She was 7, old enough to understand they were homeless, young enough to still trust her mother would fix it. "I don't know yet, baby." Rachel's voice cracked. "But somewhere safe. Always somewhere safe." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Rachel almost didn't answer. Bill collectors had her number memorized, but something made her pick up. "Dr. Rachel Torres?" The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes. My name is Martin Holloway. I'm an estate attorney with Holloway and Brennan in San Diego. I'm calling regarding the estate of Dr. Helena Vance." Rachel's world tilted. Helena Vance. She hadn't heard that name in 15 years. Her mother's estranged sister, the brilliant dermatologist who'd cut ties with the family when Rachel was 12. The aunt who'd sent a single card after Lily was born, then nothing. "Dr. Vance passed away 6 months ago," the attorney continued. "According to her will, you are her sole surviving heir." Rachel couldn't speak. Lily was watching her with those worried pink eyes. "Miss Torres, are you still there?" "Ah, yes. I'm here. I don't understand. We weren't close. I haven't spoken to her since I was a child." Nevertheless, she left very specific instructions. "The estate is complex, and there are time-sensitive matters we need to discuss. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" Rachel looked around the car that was their home, at her daughter who couldn't play outside without risking her life, at the $3.47 in her checking account. "I'm in Sacramento," she said. "I can't afford to travel to San Diego right now." A pause. "I can arrange for travel expenses." "This is important, Dr. Torres. Your aunt left you property, and there are complications that require your immediate attention." Property. The word felt foreign. Rachel owned nothing but a dying car and bags of secondhand clothes. "What kind of property?" "A research facility. The attorney hesitated. "It's been abandoned for several years. There are issues with the structure, with local ordinances." "But Miss Torres, your aunt was very specific. She wanted you to see it before making any decisions." That night, they slept in the car outside a 24-hour grocery store where the security guard knew them and looked the other way. Rachel held Lily close, feeling her daughter's too warm skin, the constant fever that came with her albinism, her compromised immune system, all the complications that made every day a medical calculation. She thought about Helena Vance, her mother's younger sister. The family had rarely spoken of her after the estrangement. Something about a disagreement over their father's care, about Helena choosing her career over family. Rachel's mother had been bitter about it until the day she died 3 years ago. But Rachel remembered Helena differently. A visit when she was 10, her aunt arriving in a sleek car, wearing a white lab coat even on her day off. She'd examined a mole on Rachel's arm with professional interest, then explained how skin cells worked, how sunlight could damage DNA, how the body tried to repair itself. "You're curious," Helena had said. "That's good. Stay curious. Never let anyone tell you that questions are inappropriate." 2 years later, Helena was gone. The family rift complete. And now, somehow, she'd left Rachel an inheritance. The flight to San Diego was Lily's first time on a plane. Rachel had insisted on first-class tickets that the attorney's office paid for without question, needing the extra space, the ability to control the window shade, to protect Lily from UV exposure even at 30,000 feet. Lily pressed her face against the window during takeoff, marveling at clouds, at the shrinking ground below. For a moment, Rachel let herself imagine a different life, one where flights weren't luxuries, where her daughter could be a regular kid instead of a medical condition that required constant vigilance. Martin Holloway's office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower in downtown San Diego. The receptionist smiled warmly at Lily, offered coloring books and juice boxes. Rachel held her daughter's hand tighter, suspicious of kindness she couldn't afford to accept. Holloway was younger than Rachel expected, maybe 40, with salt and pepper hair and a measured way of speaking that suggested he chose every word carefully. "Dr. Torres, thank you for coming." He gestured to chairs across from his desk. "And you must be Lily." Lily ducked behind Rachel's leg, shy. "Mr. Holloway," Rachel said, sitting down, "I need you to understand my situation. We're homeless. I lost my research position 8 months ago when funding dried up. I've been applying everywhere, but positions in photodermatology are rare, and I can't take anything that doesn't offer health insurance for my daughter. We've been living in my car for 3 weeks." She watched his face for judgment, found only sympathy. "I'm aware of your circumstances," he said gently. "Your aunt kept track of you. Not intrusively, but she knew about your doctorate, your work on UV protective compounds, your daughter's condition." Rachel's throat tightened. Helena had known, had watched from distance while Rachel's life fell apart, and done nothing. Why didn't she help? The words came out sharper than intended. If she knew we were struggling, why wait until she was dead? Holloway opened a folder. "According to her letters, which I'll provide to you, she believed you needed to find your own path without interference. She worried that helping too soon would, and I'm quoting here, enable dependence rather than foster resilience. But she also believed that when the time was right, you would need what she'd built." He pulled out a photograph. "This is the Vance Research Institute. Your aunt founded it in 1987, dedicated to studying photoprotective compounds and treatments for photosensitive conditions." The image showed a sprawling, single-story building, all glass and white concrete, set against a backdrop of desert landscape. It looked modern, expensive, purpose-built. Rachel felt a flutter of hope. If Helena had left her a functioning research institute, she could rebuild her career, create the treatments she'd been researching, help Lily and thousands of others with photosensitive conditions. "Mr. Holloway," she said carefully, "what's the current state of the facility?" His expression shifted. "That's where things get complicated. Dr. Vance closed the institute in 2018. She'd been diagnosed with early-onset dementia and wanted to wind down operations while she still had capacity to do so properly. But," he paused, "she also left instructions that the building was not to be touched. Not sold, not demolished, not repurposed. It was to remain sealed until you inherited it. For 5 years. Why? I don't know. But there's a problem. The building is in severe disrepair. The county has declared it a hazard. They've issued demolition orders. You have 60 days to either bring it up to code, which would cost an estimated $2 million, or consent to demolition." Rachel's brief hope evaporated. "So I'm inheriting a condemned building I can't afford to save." "There's more," Holloway said. "The estate includes liquid assets of approximately $84,000, enough to cover your immediate needs and perhaps begin repairs. But Dr. Vance left this for you." He handed her a sealed envelope, thick cream paper with Rachel's name in elegant handwriting. Rachel opened it with shaking hands. "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, I've finally surrendered to the disease that's been stealing my mind for the past few years. I hope I held on long enough to finish what I started. You probably hate me. Your mother certainly did. The family schism was my fault, my pride, my inability to compromise. I chose my work over everything, convinced myself that the research mattered more than relationships. I was wrong about that, but I was right about the science. I've been watching you from afar. I know about Lily, about her condition, about the struggles you've faced trying to care for her while advancing research that could help millions. I see myself in you, the brilliance, the dedication, the willingness to sacrifice everything for discovery. But I also see something I never had, love. You put your daughter first. You chose her over your career when that choice became necessary. That's why you're the right person for this inheritance. The institute appears abandoned. The county wants it demolished. Let them think that. But before you consent to anything, you need to see what I've really left you. The building has a basement level, not on any official plans, constructed during the original build and sealed off from public record. Access is through the main laboratory, a hidden panel behind the UV spectrometer unit on the north wall. The code is Lily's birth date, month, day, year. What you'll find below will either save you or destroy you, depending on how you use it. I've spent 30 years researching photoprotective compounds, trying to solve the puzzle of how to shield human skin from UV damage without blocking vitamin D synthesis or causing systemic toxicity. I succeeded, but the implications of that success are complicated in ways I didn't anticipate. The basement contains my life's work, every breakthrough, every formula, every trial result. It also contains something the world isn't ready for, that powerful interests would kill to possess or suppress. You'll understand when you see it. You're a scientist. You'll know what to do. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm sorry I let pride destroy our family. But I'm giving you the chance I never gave myself, the chance to choose love and science, family and discovery, the chance to build something that matters. Trust carefully, move slowly, and remember, some discoveries are too dangerous to share with the wrong people. With all the love I was too stubborn to show while alive, Helena. Rachel read the letter twice while Lily colored quietly beside her. Her hand shook. "Mr. Holloway," she said finally, "I need to see the building." He nodded. "I've arranged for access. We can go this afternoon. What about the demolition order? You have 60 days. I've already filed for an extension, citing inheritance complications." "But Rachel," he leaned forward, "if the building is as damaged as the county claims, it may not be safe to enter. My aunt left instructions. I need to follow them." The drive to the Institute took 40 minutes, heading east into the desert where land was cheap and isolation guaranteed. The landscape shifted from urban sprawl to scrubland, development giving way to emptiness. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the early flight and the stress Rachel tried to hide but knew her daughter sensed. Holloway drove in silence until they turned off the highway onto an unmarked road. A chain-link fence appeared, topped with rusted barbed wire. Beyond it, Rachel saw the building from the photograph. Except it looked nothing like the photograph. The glass was shattered, leaving gaping holes where windows had been. Graffiti covered the white concrete. Part of the roof had collapsed, exposing steel beams to the elements. Desert plants had reclaimed the courtyard, mesquite and creosote pushing through cracked pavement. It looked like a war zone. "Oh God," Rachel whispered. "The county isn't exaggerating about the hazard," Holloway said. "Are you sure you want to go inside?" Rachel looked at Lily sleeping peacefully, her white hair catching the afternoon light. She thought about the letter, about Helena's promise of something worth saving. "I'm sure." Holloway had keys to the padlocked gate. They drove through, parking in what had once been a visitor lot. Rachel woke Lily gently, helped her into her protective clothing, wide-brimmed hat, long sleeves, sunscreen on every exposed inch of skin. "Stay close to me, baby, and don't touch anything." The front entrance hung partially off its hinges. Inside, the devastation was worse. Vandals had destroyed everything within reach. Equipment lay smashed on the floor. Walls were tagged with spray paint. The smell of decay and abandonment hung heavy in the still air. "This is the main laboratory," Holloway said, consulting a building plan on his phone, according to the original schematics. But Rachel was already moving, her scientific mind automatically categorizing what she saw. This had been a serious research facility. Even destroyed, she could see the quality of the equipment, the careful layout designed for efficiency and safety. She found the north wall, or what remained of it. The spectrometer unit was gone, probably stolen years ago. But the wall panel behind, where it would have been stood intact, painted the same institutional white as everything else, nearly invisible. Rachel ran her hands along the seam, found a small keypad hidden in a recessed area. The numbers were worn but functional. She entered Lily's birth date. Nothing happened. She tried it backwards. Still nothing. Think, Rachel. What would Helena do? She tried the European format, day, month, year. A soft click. The panel popped open an inch. Rachel's heart hammered. She pulled the panel fully open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Dr. Torres Holloway said nervously, "Maybe we should get professionals. Structural engineers, safety inspectors." But Rachel was already descending, phone flashlight illuminating concrete steps that looked solid, undamaged. Behind her, she heard Holloway following, muttering about liability. The staircase was longer than expected, at least 20 feet down. At the bottom, another door, this one heavy steel with a more sophisticated lock, biometric scanner beside an electronic keypad. Rachel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but the message was clear. "Use your right thumbprint. I added your biometric data to the system 5 years ago." Rachel's breath caught. Helena had planned this years in advance. She pressed her thumb to the scanner. Green light. The keypad illuminated. She entered Lily's birth date again. The door's locks disengaged with a series of heavy mechanical sounds. The door swung open on smooth, well-maintained hinges. Beyond was light, bright, clean, artificial illumination revealing a space that looked nothing like the ruin above. Rachel stepped through, and her world changed forever. The basement was enormous, easily 5,000 square feet. Climate-controlled, judging by the gentle hum of HVAC systems. And pristine, not a speck of dust, not a hint of the decay that consumed the building above. The space was divided into sections. On the left, laboratory benches with equipment that made Rachel's heart race, spectrophotometers, chromatography systems, electron microscopes, all top of the line, all maintained in perfect working order. In the center, a library of sorts. Filing cabinets, bookshelves, and a long table covered with organized stacks of research journals and bound notebooks. On the right, something that made Rachel stop breathing. A wall of glass-fronted refrigeration units, each one carefully labeled and lit. Inside, hundreds of vials, samples, compounds, all organized with scientific precision. And on the far wall, a single large monitor with a computer workstation below it. Mr. Holloway had followed her down. He stood in the doorway, stunned. "Dr. Torres, what is all this?" Rachel moved to the nearest research journal, opened it carefully. Helena's handwriting, detailed notes about photoprotective compound synthesis, molecular structures drawn with meticulous accuracy, trial results documented with scientific rigor. "This is 30 years of research," Rachel breathed. "This is everything my aunt discovered." She moved to the refrigeration units, read the labels. Formula A7, photoprotective efficacy 94%, minimal cytotoxicity. Formula B12, broad-spectrum UV absorption, stable in aqueous solution. Formula C19, promising results in melanin synthesis stimulation without carcinogenic markers. Each label included dates, trial numbers, and effectiveness ratings. This wasn't just research. This was a complete archive of successful photoprotective compounds. Rachel's hands shook as she opened one of the refrigeration units. The vials inside were professionally sealed, labeled, stored at precise temperatures. She pulled out one at random. Formula D23, the label read. Revolutionary UV protection. Complete synthesis protocol in Journal 17, page 42. She practically ran to the filing cabinets, found Journal 17, flipped to page 42. What she read made her knees weak. Helena had done it. She'd solved the fundamental problem that had plagued photoprotection research for decades. She'd created compounds that blocked harmful UV radiation while allowing beneficial wavelengths through that boosted the skin's natural protective mechanisms without toxic side effects, that could be synthesized affordably and applied topically or taken orally. "This could help Lily," Rachel whispered. "This could help millions of people with photosensitive conditions." She kept reading, her scientific mind absorbing the elegance of Helena's work. The molecular structures were brilliant, innovative applications of organic chemistry that Rachel had never seen in peer-reviewed literature. Why didn't she publish this? Rachel asked aloud. Why hide it? The computer monitor flickered to life, as if answering her question. A video file began playing automatically. Helena appeared on screen. She looked older than Rachel remembered, maybe 60, with gray hair and sharp eyes that held both brilliance and sadness. Rachel, if you're watching this, you've found the lab. Good. That means you're ready. Helena settled into a chair, and Rachel realized this video was recent, maybe recorded shortly before her death. I need to explain why I kept all of this secret. Why I didn't publish, didn't patent, didn't bring these compounds to market. The answer is complicated and terrifying. Helena pulled up a document on screen, a contract from a pharmaceutical company. Decades ago, I made a deal with Medichem Industries. They funded my research in exchange for first rights to any commercially viable discoveries. It seemed reasonable at the time. I was young, needed funding, believed pharmaceutical companies existed to help people. Her expression hardened. I was wrong. When I developed the first truly effective photoprotective compound in 1995, I was elated. This was going to change medicine, prevent skin cancer, help people like your daughter live normal lives. Medichem immediately classified it, buried it. When I asked why, they explained the economics. Effective UV protection would devastate their sunscreen division, a $2 billion annual revenue stream. More importantly, preventing skin cancer would eliminate a major customer base for their oncology drugs. The treatments they sold for melanoma generated far more profit than prevention ever could. Rachel felt sick. They threatened me, Helena continued. Reminded me of the contract I'd signed. Said if I tried to publish or share the research independently, they'd sue me into oblivion and bury my career. I fought back, hired lawyers, tried to break the contract, spent 5 years in litigation. I lost. The contract was ironclad. Everything I discovered using their funding belonged to them. And they were very clear, if I continued to pursue this, they would make sure I never worked in research again. Helena's face showed the pain of old wounds. So I made a choice. I closed the public-facing institute. I stopped publishing. I let the world think I'd retired. But I didn't stop researching. She leaned toward the camera. I built this basement lab with my own money, separate from anything Medichem had funded. For 15 years, I continued the work in secret. I refined the compounds, developed new formulations, documented everything meticulously. All of it completely independent of their resources. This research is mine, Rachel. Legally, ethically, scientifically. I made sure of that. Multiple lawyers have reviewed the work. As long as I didn't use Medichem's funding or equipment after 1998, I own it. Helena pulled out a thick folder. These are the legal opinions. Patent applications ready to file. Licensing agreements drafted for non-profit distribution. Everything you need to bring this to the world the right way. But you need to understand what you're facing. Medichem still exists, bigger and more powerful than ever. They have lawyers, lobbyists, and no moral qualms about suppressing medical breakthroughs that threaten their profits. If they learn about this research, they'll claim it violates the original contract. They'll argue I used derivative knowledge from their funding. They'll tie you up in court for years. She paused, and her voice softened. That's why I chose you, Rachel. You're brilliant. You understand the science. But more importantly, you have something I never did, a reason to fight that goes beyond academic achievement or professional recognition. Helena smiled sadly. Lily needs this. Children like her around the world need this. And you're a mother. You'll protect this research the way you protect your daughter, fiercely, completely, without compromise. The video shifted to show the laboratory around her. I've left you everything, Rachel. 30 years of research, hundreds of successful compounds, detailed synthesis protocols, trial data, everything needed to bring these treatments to market. The vials in the refrigeration units represent enough photoprotective compounds to treat 10,000 patients for a year. But I've also left you a choice. You could try to commercialize this through traditional channels. Patent it, license it, work with ethical pharmaceutical companies if such things exist. That's the safe, legal, slow approach. It might work. It might also get buried again. Or Helena's eyes gleamed with something dangerous. You could do what I was too afraid to do. You can share it freely. Open source the research. Make it available to any laboratory that wants to synthesize these compounds. Release it into the wild, where no corporation can suppress it. That's risky. You'll be sued. You'll make powerful enemies, but the research will survive. The treatments will reach people who need them, and corporations like Medicam won't be able to stop it once it's everywhere. She leaned back. I'm giving you the tools to make either choice. Legal documentation for the traditional route. Digital archives ready for immediate worldwide distribution for the radical one. What you decide depends on how much you're willing to risk for what you believe in. The video paused, then Helena spoke one more time. One more thing, Rachel. The valuation reports are in the filing cabinet, marked financial. Multiple independent analysts have reviewed the research. Their conservative estimate places the total value of these compounds at $478 million if properly developed and marketed. You're not inheriting a broken building, my dear. You're inheriting $500 million worth of life-saving medical research. What you do with it will define both our legacies. Choose wisely, fight hard, and give Lily a hug from the aunt who loved her from a distance, but never stopped hoping you'd both have the life you deserve. The screen went dark. Rachel stood frozen, her mind reeling. $478 million. Hundreds of compounds. The potential to help millions. And a choice that could either save her family or destroy what remained of her life. Lily tugged at her hand. Mama, are you okay? Rachel looked down at her daughter's concerned face, at those pink eyes that saw the world through a lens of pain and limitation Rachel had been desperate to change. Behind them, Holloway cleared his throat. Dr. Torres, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. If what Dr. Vance said is accurate, you're looking at potential legal battles that could consume years and cost millions. Medicam is a Fortune 500 company. They have unlimited resources. But they don't have this, Rachel said quietly, gesturing at the laboratory. They don't have the research, and they don't have my daughter's future motivating them. She turned to face him fully. Mr. Holloway, I need you to tell me something honestly. If I try to protect this research, to bring it to people who need it, can I win? Holloway was quiet for a long moment. Then he said in court, maybe not. The legal system favors corporations with deep pockets. But Dr. Torres, court isn't the only battlefield. Your aunt understood that. That's why she left you options. Rachel moved to the filing cabinet marked financial, pulled out the valuation reports Helena had mentioned. Page after page of analysis, market projections, potential revenue streams. The numbers were staggering. But what caught her eye was a handwritten note on the final page in Helena's distinctive script. The value isn't in the money, Rachel. It's in the 7-year-old girl who should be able to play outside. It's in the teenager who should attend school without fear. It's in the parent who shouldn't have to choose between their child's safety and financial survival. If you remember that, you'll make the right choice. Rachel closed the folder and looked around the laboratory, at the equipment that could synthesize life-changing treatments, at the vials containing compounds that could help her daughter live normally, at the research journals documenting 30 years of scientific breakthrough achieved in secret, in isolation, by a woman too proud to compromise but too ethical to let her work die with her. Lily had wandered to one of the laboratory benches, was examining a molecular model with fascination. She turned it slowly, studying the structure. Mama, what is this place? This, Rachel said, her voice stronger than it had been in months, is where we're going to change the world. She pulled out her phone, took a photograph of the laboratory, then another of the refrigeration units, the research journals, the equipment, documenting everything with the systematic precision of a scientist building an evidence trail. What are you doing? Holloway asked, making sure that no matter what happens next, this research survives. Helena gave me a choice, Mr. Holloway. I'm making it. Which choice? Rachel looked at her daughter, at the hope and trust in those pink eyes. She thought about every mother with a photosensitive child, every patient suffering from conditions these compounds could treat, every person denied access to life-changing medicine because it threatened corporate profits. Both, she said. We're going to do this the right way, legally, properly, through every appropriate channel. We're going to try to bring these treatments to market through traditional means, with patents and licensing and all the protections Helena set up. She pulled out the folder of legal documents. But we're also going to prepare to release everything openly if that path fails. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about money or revenge or even justice. It's about making sure kids like Lily get to live full lives. Holloway studied her face. You understand what you're committing to? The fight this will require? Mr. Holloway, Rachel said, I've been fighting for my daughter's survival since the day she was born. I've fought insurance companies, medical bills, employers who didn't understand her needs, a world that wasn't built for children who can't be in the sun. This is just a different battlefield. She gathered the most critical research journals, the legal documents, the financial valuations. We need to secure this facility immediately. Climate control, security systems, everything necessary to preserve the research. Can the estate funds cover that? The estate funds will cover initial security and climate control, Holloway confirmed, pulling out his phone to start making calls. But Dr. Torres, we need to move quickly. If the county discovers you're trying to preserve the building, they may accelerate the demolition timeline. Then we don't tell them, Rachel said. As far as anyone knows, I'm here to assess the property before consenting to demolition. We secure the basement lab quietly, hire contractors who won't ask questions. Holloway paused. That's actually quite strategic. You thought about this. Mr. Holloway, I've been strategizing survival for 7 years. This is just a different kind of problem. Over the next week, Rachel learned to navigate a world she'd never imagined inhabiting. Holloway connected her with a security company that specialized in discreet installations. They arrived at night, dressed like HVAC repair technicians, and spent 3 days installing reinforced doors, biometric locks, and a backup power system for the basement laboratory. The cost was staggering, $47,000. Rachel signed the authorization with shaking hands, watching nearly 2/3 of Helena's liquid assets disappear into security measures. But it was necessary. The research was worthless if it was destroyed. Next came climate control specialists who ensured the temperature and humidity in the basement stayed within precise parameters. Another $12,000. Then a company that specialized in hazardous material storage reviewed the refrigeration units, updated the cooling systems, and certified that the compounds were properly contained. $8,000 more. By the end of the first week, Rachel had spent $67,000 of the $84,000 Helena had left her. She had $17,000 remaining for everything else: living expenses, legal fees, whatever came next. Lily thought it was an adventure. The attorney's office had arranged for them to stay in a modest hotel near the research facility, 2 beds and a kitchenette that felt like luxury after weeks in the car. Lily had her own bed for the first time in months. She could take long baths instead of quick rinses in gas station bathrooms. She could watch cartoons on an actual television. "Mama," she said one evening while Rachel reviewed research journals at the small table, "is this our house now?" "No, baby. This is just temporary while we figure things out. But we're not sleeping in the car anymore." Rachel set down the journal, pulled Lily onto her lap. "No, sweetheart. We're not sleeping in the car anymore. I promise." "Because of the magic ant?" Rachel smiled despite herself. "Because of Aunt Helena. She left us something important, something that might help a lot of people. But we have to be very careful with it." "Can it help me?" Lily asked, her small fingers tracing the veins visible through her pale skin. "Can it make me not sick?" Rachel's throat tightened. "That's what I'm trying to find out. The research your aunt left, it's all about protecting skin from the sun. There might be medicine in there that could help you go outside without getting hurt." Lily's eyes widened. "Like normal kids?" "Like anyone else," Rachel confirmed, though the promise terrified her. She couldn't know yet if Helena's compounds would work for Lily specifically. The research was extensive, but individual responses varied. Still, the hope in her daughter's face was worth the risk. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Rachel returned to the laboratory alone. Holloway had given her complete access, and she'd been spending every available hour trying to understand the full scope of what Helena had left her. The research was brilliant. That became clearer with each journal she read, each compound she examined. Helena had approached photoprotection from multiple angles simultaneously, topical applications that created physical barriers, oral compounds that enhanced the skin's natural defenses, even gene therapy protocols that could potentially correct the mutations that cause conditions like Lily's albinism. But as Rachel dug deeper, she found something that made her blood run cold. In a journal dated 2003, Helena had written, "Medichem sent another letter today. Their lawyers are threatening renewed litigation if I don't cease all photo protection research. They claim my work, even conducted independently, constitutes theft of intellectual property because it builds on foundational knowledge gained during my time under their contract. I've consulted with 3 different attorneys. 2 believe I have a strong case for independent development. The 3rd warned me that winning in court doesn't matter if the legal fees bankrupt me first. Medichem knows this. They don't need to win. They just need to make fighting too expensive to sustain. I'm going deeper underground. No more papers, even under pseudonyms. No collaborations. No hints that this work continues. Let them think I gave up. Meanwhile, I'll build something they can't touch, can't suppress, can't destroy." Rachel flipped through more journals, watching Helena's isolation deepen. By 2010, the entries became sporadic, often just data and formulas without commentary. By 2015, Helena was writing about her fading memory, about dementia stealing her capacity to continue the work. One entry from 2016 broke Rachel's heart. "I can't remember my mother's face today. Can't remember the house I grew up in, the name of my first pet. But I can still recall every molecular structure, every synthesis protocol. The disease is taking my life, but leaving my science intact. Perhaps that's mercy. Perhaps that's curse. I don't know anymore." Rachel should be 29 now. I looked at old photos trying to remember her, but I can only see the child she was. Smart girl. So curious. I wonder if she became a scientist. I wonder if she forgave me for abandoning the family. Forgave me for abandoning her. Rachel wiped tears from her face. Helena had cared, had thought about her, had wanted connection but been too proud, too damaged, too afraid to reach out. She found a final journal, dated just 8 months before Helena's death. The handwriting was shakier, but still legible. "Memory is almost gone now. I have to wear a bracelet with my name and address. Have to set alarms to remind me to eat. But I've finished it. The complete synthesis protocol for the most effective photoprotective compound I've ever created. Formula X1. Broad-spectrum UV protection. Minimal side effects. Can be produced cheaply enough for global distribution. This is it. This is the breakthrough I've spent 30 years pursuing. I'm leaving it all to Rachel. Not because she's family, though she is. Not because I owe her, though I do. But because I've been watching her work. She published a paper last year on melanin synthesis pathways. Brilliant. She understands this science maybe better than I ever did. More importantly, she has Lily, a daughter with albinism. She knows what's at stake. She won't let this die. She can't afford to. Rachel turned the page. Found the formula for X, one laid out in meticulous detail. Molecular structure, synthesis pathway, testing protocols, everything needed to produce the compound. And a note at the bottom. This is worth more than money, Rachel. This is legacy. Use it wisely. Use it well. And forgive me for not being there when you needed me. I hope this helps you be there for Lily. Rachel photographed every page. Uploading the images to a secure cloud storage account Holloway had helped her set up. If anything happened to the physical journals, the research would survive digitally. Her phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time she recognized the pattern. Holloway had warned her that once word got out about Helena's death and the inheritance, people would start calling. She answered. "Dr. Torres?" The voice was smooth, confident male. "My name is Richard Brenner. I'm the chief legal counsel for Medichem Industries. I understand you've inherited Dr. Helena Vance's estate." Rachel's pulse quickened. "Already. They found out already." "That's correct," she said carefully. "First, let me offer my condolences. Dr. Vance was a brilliant researcher. We had a long professional relationship with her, and her passing is a loss to the scientific community." "Thank you," Rachel said, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I'm calling because we've become aware that Dr. Vance may have left research materials that technically belong to Medichem Industries under the terms of a contract she signed in 1987. We'd like to schedule a meeting to review these materials and ensure proper ownership is established." Rachel's hand tightened on the phone. I'm not aware of any Medichem property in my aunt's estate. Everything I found appears to be her personal research, conducted independently. A pause. Dr. Torres, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. The contract Dr. Van signed was very clear. Any research related to photoprotective compounds developed using knowledge gained during her time under our funding belongs to Medichem. This includes derivative works and independent developments in the same field. That's an extremely broad interpretation of intellectual property law, Rachel said, her scientific training kicking in. You can't claim ownership of an entire field of research. We're not claiming the field. We're claiming specific discoveries that built on proprietary foundations. Brenner's tone hardened slightly. Now, we can handle this cooperatively. You grant us access to review the research. We determine what belongs to Medichem, and we compensate you fairly for any truly independent work. Or, we can handle this through litigation, which I promise you will be much more expensive and time-consuming. I'll need to consult with my attorney, Rachel said. Of course. But Dr. Torres, a word of advice. Your aunt spent 15 years fighting us. It consumed her career, her finances, her relationships. She died alone and forgotten because she couldn't let go of research that wasn't hers to keep. You have a daughter to think about. Don't make the same mistakes Helena did. The line went dead. Rachel sat in the laboratory's silence, fury and fear warring inside her. They were already threatening her, already using Lily as leverage. She called Holloway immediately. They know, she said when he answered. Medichem knows about the research. How? We've been so careful. Holloway was quiet for a moment. The security company, the climate control specialists. Someone must have talked, or they've been watching the property, waiting to see what you do with it. What do I do? Holloway sighed. The honest answer? Most people in your position would fold. Medichem has unlimited resources. They can keep you in court for years. The stress alone would be crushing, especially with Lily to care for. Rachel stared at the refrigeration units, filled with compounds that could change her daughter's life. But I'm not most people. No, Holloway agreed. You're not. So we fight. But we fight smart. I'll reach out to some colleagues who specialize in intellectual property law. We need experts who understand pharmaceutical patents and can argue that Helena's independent research isn't covered by a contract signed 37 years ago. What will that cost? Holloway was quiet. More than you have. IP litigation like this, we're talking hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Possibly millions if it goes to trial. Then I'll sell something, Rachel said. There must be something we can liquidate to fund the fight. The building is worthless in its current condition. The research itself can't be sold until ownership is established. We're essentially locked in a catch-22. Rachel looked around the laboratory at 30 years of breakthrough science, at hope measured in vials and documented in journals, at the difference between Lily living in fear of sunlight or living freely. Then we find another way, she said. The next morning, Rachel received a certified letter. Medichem Industries was filing a preliminary injunction to prevent her from accessing, using, or distributing any research materials from Helena's estate until ownership could be determined by the courts. Holloway's face was grim when they met to discuss it. This is aggressive. They're not waiting for you to agree to a review. They're trying to lock everything down immediately. Can they do that? They could try. We'll fight the injunction, but Rachel, you need to understand. If a judge grants this, you won't be able to touch the research. You won't be able to test the compounds, synthesize new batches, or share any information with anyone. It all gets sealed until the legal battle is resolved, which could take years. Exactly. Rachel thought about Lily, about the excitement in her daughter's eyes when she'd asked, "Can it help me?" About the 7-year-old girl who'd never played at a park in the middle of the day, never gone to the beach, never done 1,000 things normal children did because the sun that gave life to most people threatened to kill her. When's the hearing for the injunction? 2 weeks. We need to prepare a defense, show that Helena's research is clearly independent, not derivative of Medichem's work. Rachel stood, decision crystallizing. Then we have 2 weeks to document everything, to show exactly what Helena discovered and when, to prove this research is hers, not theirs. She spent the next 14 days living in the laboratory. Lily stayed at the hotel, with a babysitter Holloway had arranged, a kind older woman who didn't ask questions about why a 7-year-old needed sun protection indoors. Rachel methodically photographed every journal, every formula, every piece of documentation Helena had left. She created a timeline of discoveries, matching dates in the journals to external events and published research, showing that Helena's breakthroughs had come years or decades after a Medicam contract ended. She found Helena's original contract, buried in a filing cabinet. It was damning in its breadth. Medicam had essentially claimed ownership of any photoprotection research Helena conducted for the duration of her career. But there were also clauses about what constituted derivative work and the definition of independent development. Rachel pored over those clauses with Holloway, and an IP attorney named Sandra Kwan who agreed to take the case at a reduced rate because, as she said, Medicam is a bully, and I hate bullies. The contract has weaknesses, Sandra said, pointing to specific language. They claim derivative work, but derivative requires using their proprietary methods or data. If we can show Helena developed entirely new approaches, new methodologies, we have an argument. Can we show that? Holloway asked. Rachel pulled out several journals. Yes. Look at this. Medicam's research in the 80s focused on chemical UV blockers, compounds that absorb radiation. Helena's independent work went in a completely different direction, biological enhancement of the skin's natural photoprotective mechanisms. Different approach, different methodology, different target. Sandra smiled. That's good. That's very good. We can build a defense on this. The hearing took place in a federal courthouse in San Diego. Rachel wore her only professional outfit, a suit she'd bought 7 years ago for job interviews and hadn't touched since. It still fit, barely, though she'd lost weight from stress and irregular meals. Lily couldn't come. The courtroom had too many windows, too much natural light. She stayed at the hotel with the babysitter, and Rachel's heart ached knowing her daughter was the reason for all of this but couldn't be present for it. Medicam's legal team arrived with 3 attorneys in expensive suits, carrying bankers' boxes full of documents. They looked polished, confident, like people who'd never lost. Sandra and Holloway looked competent but outmatched. 2 lawyers against 3, with a fraction of the resources. The judge was a woman in her 60s, Judge Patricia Morrison, with a reputation for being fair but strict. She listened to Medicam's arguments first. Your Honor, their lead attorney argued, Dr. Helena Vance signed a comprehensive research agreement with Medicam Industries in 1987. Under that agreement, any research conducted in the field of photoprotection, using knowledge gained during her employment, belongs to Medicam. Dr. Vance violated this agreement by conducting unauthorized research for decades. Her heir, Dr. Torres, is now in possession of our intellectual property. He presented the original contract, highlighted the relevant clauses, and concluded, we're asking for a preliminary injunction to prevent Dr. Torres from accessing, using, or distributing this research until ownership can be properly determined. Judge Morrison turned to Sandra. Response? Sandra stood, and Rachel was struck by her presence. She didn't look intimidated. She looked ready. Your Honor, the contract Medicam relies on is 37 years old. Dr. Vance fulfilled all obligations under that contract, which ended in 1998 when their funding relationship concluded. Everything she discovered after that date was independent work, funded by her personal resources, conducted in a private laboratory, using novel methodologies that differed substantially from Medicam's approach. She presented the timeline Rachel had created, showing the clear demarcation between contracted work and independent research. Moreover, Your Honor, Medicam cannot claim ownership of an entire field of study. Their contract may have covered specific compounds and methods developed under their funding, but it doesn't grant them eternal rights to all photoprotection research. That would effectively prevent Dr. Vance from working in her own field of expertise for her entire career, which is an unconscionable restraint of trade. Judge Morrison studied the documents. Dr. Torres, you're the heir in question? Rachel stood, her legs shaky. Yes, Your Honor. What's your interest in this research? Are you planning to commercialize it? Rachel thought about the easy answer, the one that would make her seem sympathetic. but she'd promised herself honesty. Your Honor, my 7-year-old daughter has albinism with photosensitivity. She can't be in sunlight without risking serious injury. My aunt's research includes compounds that could help her and thousands of others with similar conditions. I want to develop these treatments and make them available to people who need them. For profit? Judge Morrison asked. Rachel met her eyes. I don't know yet. I'm still trying to understand what my aunt left me and what's legally possible. But Your Honor, I do know that my daughter deserves a chance at a normal life, and this research might provide that. Medicam had 30 years to develop these treatments. They chose not to because it wasn't profitable enough. I won't make that choice. The Medicam attorney stood. Your Honor, this is exactly why the injunction is necessary. Dr. Torres has admitted she intends to use research that may belong to my client. Without the injunction, she could disseminate proprietary information that Medicam has invested millions to develop. Except you didn't develop it, Sandra countered. You buried it. Dr. Vance's own journals document Medicam's decision to suppress effective photoprotection because it would hurt their existing product lines. They're not trying to protect innovation. They're trying to prevent it. The judge held up a hand. I've heard enough for today. I'm taking this under advisement. You'll have my ruling within 48 hours. Rachel left the courthouse feeling hollowed out. 48 hours to learn if everything Helena had worked for would be locked away indefinitely. Holloway put a hand on her shoulder. You did well in there. Honest, direct. Judges appreciate that. Did I just make everything worse? Rachel asked. By admitting I want to use the research? You were honest, Sandra said, and you humanized the stakes. Medicam is talking about intellectual property and contract law. You're talking about a child who can't play outside. That matters. But will it be enough? We'll know soon. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay in the hotel room, listening to Lily breathe, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The years of struggling, of working multiple jobs to pay for Lily's care, of watching her daughter miss out on childhood because of a genetic condition neither of them could control. The research position at UC Davis had been a lifeline. Good pay, health insurance, the opportunity to work on exactly the kind of photoprotective compounds that might help Lily. Rachel had thrown herself into the work, staying late, publishing papers, building a reputation. Then the funding dried up. Grant money redirected to more profitable research areas. Rachel's position was grant-funded, which meant no grant equaled no job. She'd looked for other positions, sent out dozens of applications, had a few interviews. But every interview followed the same pattern. They'd be interested until they learned about Lily, about the medical appointments and emergencies. Then the enthusiasm would cool. They'd say they'd be in touch. They never were. Rachel had burned through her savings in 3 months. Started missing rent payments. Started making impossible choices. Medicine or food. Rent or car payment. Each decision a tiny defeat. The eviction had been almost a relief. At least then she knew where she stood. Homeless, yes, but no longer drowning in debt she couldn't pay. The car became their home because it was the only home she could afford. She'd applied for assistance. Government programs, charity organizations, anything that might help. But the waiting lists were months long, and the requirements were impossible. You needed an address to get assistance, but you needed assistance to get an address. Some nights, sitting in the car while Lily slept, Rachel had looked at the pharmacy bottles of Lily's medications and thought about how many pills it would take. Not for her, never for her, but for both of them. A way to end the struggle, to stop failing her daughter day after day. She never did it, never even seriously considered it, really. But the thoughts came in the dark hours, and they terrified her because they meant she was breaking, that the constant weight of responsibility and fear was crushing her into someone she didn't recognize. And then Helena's attorney had called, and everything changed, except it hadn't, not really. Rachel had traded one set of impossible problems for another. Instead of wondering where they'd sleep, she was wondering if lawyers would take away the one thing that might save her daughter. Different problems. Same helplessness. Her phone buzzed at 6 a.m. unknown number. Rachel's heart jumped. Too early for social call. This was news. Dr. Torres? Judge Morrison's clerk. The judge has issued her ruling on the preliminary injunction. You can access it through the court's online portal, or I can summarize it for you. Please, Rachel said, her voice barely working. Tell me. The judge denied Medicam's request for a preliminary injunction. She ruled that Dr. Torres has presented sufficient evidence that the research in question may be independent work not covered by the original contract. The full question of ownership will be determined at trial, but until then, you're free to access and use the research materials as you see fit. Rachel's hands shook so badly, she almost dropped the phone. She denied it? We can use the research? Correct. Though I should note that Medicam is likely to appeal this decision. But for now, the injunction is denied. After the clerk hung up, Rachel sat on the bed and cried. Big, gasping sobs that woke Lily, who crawled in her lap, concerned. Mama? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, baby. Rachel held her tight. Everything's right. For the first time in so long, something's actually right. Sandra called an hour later, elated. This is huge, Rachel. Huge. The judge's ruling basically said Medicam doesn't have a strong enough case to lock down the research. It's not a final victory, but it's a major win. What happens now? Now we prepare for trial. They'll argue their case, we'll argue ours, and eventually a judge or jury will decide who owns what. But in the meantime, you can work with the research. You can test the compounds, run trials, even begin commercialization if you're ready. Rachel thought about Formula X. One, about Helena's final breakthrough. How long until trial? Could be a year, maybe more. Medicam will drag this out as long as possible, hoping you run out of money for legal fees. Then I need to move fast, Rachel said. If I can prove these compounds work, if I can show they help patients, that's leverage. That's proof that this research is too important to suppress. Be careful, Sandra warned. Medicam will be watching everything you do. Any mistake, any hint that you're using their proprietary methods, and they'll come at you even harder. I'll be careful, but I won't be slow. My daughter can't wait for the legal system to decide her fate. Rachel spent the next week planning. She needed to test the compounds properly, which meant setting up clinical trials, getting IRB approval, recruiting participants, all of which required money she didn't have and time she couldn't afford. But there was another option, a faster, riskier option. She could test the compounds on herself. As a scientist with a PhD in photodermatology, she understood the risks. She could monitor her own response, document the effects, and if the results were promising, use that data to support larger trials. It wasn't ideal. Self-experimentation had ethical complications, but it was legal, it was fast. And if she was going to ask other parents to trust these compounds with their children, shouldn't she trust them with herself first? Rachel reviewed Formula X1's documentation again. Helena had conducted extensive animal trials. The compound showed no toxicity in mice, rats, or primates. It effectively blocked UV radiation without the common side effects of existing sunscreens. No skin irritation, no hormone disruption, no coral reef damage. The synthesis was complex but doable. Rachel had access to the laboratory equipment Helena had left. She had the detailed protocols. She could create a small batch, test it on herself, document the results. She called Holloway. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. If I synthesize one of Helena's compounds and test it on myself, am I violating any laws or putting the legal case at risk? Holloway was quiet. Testing on yourself isn't illegal. Scientists have a long history of self-experimentation. But Rachel, if something goes wrong, if you have an adverse reaction, Medicam will use it to argue the research is dangerous and shouldn't be released. What if nothing goes wrong? What if it works? Then you have powerful evidence that these compounds are safe and effective. But it's a gamble. Everything about this is a gamble, Rachel said. At least this way, I control the odds. She spent 3 days synthesizing Formula X, one from the base compounds Helena had stored. The process was exacting, requiring precise measurements and careful temperature control. Rachel worked alone in the laboratory, following Helena's protocols exactly. When she finally held the completed compound, a clear gel that looked like ordinary moisturizer, she felt the weight of 30 years of research in her hands. This was what Helena had died trying to protect. This was hope measured in molecular structures. Rachel applied a small amount to her left forearm, leaving her right arm as a control. Then she stepped outside into the San Diego sun at midday, the most intense UV exposure possible. She stood there for 10 minutes, monitoring her skin for any reaction. No burning on the treated arm, no redness, no irritation. The control arm started to pink after 7 minutes. Rachel went back inside, documented everything with photographs and notes. Then she increased the exposure time. 15 minutes, 20, 30. The treated arm showed no damage. The untreated arm was noticeably sunburned. Formula X, one worked. Rachel could barely contain her excitement. She called Sandra immediately. I need to accelerate the legal strategy. Helena's compounds work. I've tested them myself, and the photoprotection is real. How certain are you? Scientifically certain. I followed every protocol. The results are reproducible. This isn't just promising research. This is a functioning treatment. Sandra's voice grew serious. Then we need to move very carefully. If Medichem learns you've successfully synthesized and tested these compounds, they'll escalate. They might try for an emergency injunction, claim you're endangering public safety. Let them try, Rachel said. I have documentation of everything. Clean methodology, careful safety protocols. If they want to argue this research is dangerous, I'll present evidence that it's the opposite. What about Lily? Sandra asked quietly. Have you thought about testing it on her? Rachel had thought about little else. Every night, watching Lily sleep in clothes that covered every inch of her skin, in a room with blackout curtains, she imagined what it would mean if the formula worked for her daughter. Lily could go outside, could play at a park, could go to a regular school instead of the homebound instruction that was all Rachel could manage, could have a childhood that wasn't defined by what she couldn't do. But rushing to test an experimental compound on her 7-year-old daughter without proper trials or safety data beyond Rachel's own limited self-experimentation, that was the kind of desperate gamble that could end in tragedy. Not yet, Rachel said. Not until I have more data. I'll keep testing on myself, expand the exposure scenarios. If it stays safe, if the protection holds, then we'll talk about trials for pediatric patients. That's smart, Sandra agreed. Patient. Build the evidence base properly. But patience was hard when every day meant Lily stayed locked inside, stayed trapped by a condition that might finally have a treatment. Rachel continued self-testing for 2 weeks, documenting everything meticulously. She spent hours in direct sunlight, applied the compound to different areas of skin, tested it under various conditions: morning sun, afternoon sun, reflected UV from water and sand. The protection held. Not only held, but exceeded her expectations. She showed no signs of sun damage despite exposure that would normally cause severe burns. More importantly, the compound seemed to boost her skin's natural defenses. Even after washing it off, she noticed her skin was more resistant to UV damage than before. It was as if Formula X, one was training her cells to protect themselves better. Helena had done it. She'd created something revolutionary, and Medichem had known, had buried it, had threatened legal destruction to keep it suppressed. Rachel's phone rang. Martin Holloway. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Someone broke into the research facility last night. Rachel's blood went cold. The laboratory? They tried. The security system stopped them. Biometric locks held. But Rachel, they knew exactly where to go. They bypassed the main building damage and went straight for the basement access. Who? We don't know. The police are investigating, but the perpetrators were professionals. No fingerprints, no identification, in and out fast when the alarm's triggered. Medichem, Rachel said. Possibly. Or someone else who knows about the research. Helena made enemies beyond just one pharmaceutical company. Is everything secure? Yes. The lab wasn't breached. But this is a warning. Someone wants what you have. Then we need to make sure they can't take it. Rachel said. I want backup systems. Multiple redundant security measures. And I want copies of all the research stored off-site, somewhere they can't reach. Already working on it, Holloway confirmed. But Rachel, this changes things. You're not just fighting a legal battle anymore. You're dealing with people willing to commit crimes to get this research. All the more reason to move faster, Rachel said. The longer this stays locked up, the more danger we're in. We need to get the compounds out into the world where they can't be suppressed. That evening, Rachel sat with Lily and had a conversation she'd been dreading. Baby, I need to explain something to you about what we're doing here. The research Aunt Helena left us, it's very important. There are some people who don't want us to have it, who might try to take it from us. Lily's eyes widened. Bad people? People who are more interested in money than in helping others, Rachel said carefully. They don't want treatments like the one that might help you to exist because they make more money selling things that don't work as well. That's mean, Lily said with the moral clarity of childhood. Yes, it is. So we have to be very careful. If anyone tries to talk to you, anyone you don't know, don't tell them about the laboratory or what Mama is working on. Can you do that? Lily nodded solemnly. I can keep secrets. It's not really a secret, Rachel said. We're not doing anything wrong. We're trying to help people. But sometimes helping people makes other people angry. Why? Rachel didn't have a good answer to that. Because the world is complicated and not always fair, she said finally. But we're going to try to make it a little more fair. Over the next month, Rachel divided her time between continuing to test Formula X, and preparing for the legal battle ahead. Sandra was building their case, gathering expert witnesses, preparing arguments. Medichem was doing the same, and their resources dwarfed anything Rachel could access. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Rachel received an email from Dr. James Chun, a dermatologist at Stanford who'd read one of her old papers on melanin synthesis. He'd heard through academic circles that she'd inherited Helena Vance's estate and wanted to know if the rumors about photoprotective research were true. Rachel was cautious in her response. Confirmed she had access to Helena's research, but didn't share specifics. Dr. Chin wrote back immediately. Dr. Torres, I've been following Dr. Vance's work for 20 years. I know what Medichem did to her, how they suppressed breakthrough research to protect their profit margins. If even a fraction of what I suspect she discovered is real, it could revolutionize dermatology. I want to help. No payment, no strings attached. This is about science and patient care, not profit. Rachel called him that afternoon. They talked for 2 hours. Dr. Chun had credibility, publications, academic standing. He also had something Rachel desperately needed, an established medical practice where clinical trials could be conducted. If you can provide samples of these compounds, he said, I can run proper trials. Double-blind, placebo-controlled, with institutional review board oversight. We do it by the book, and the results will be unassailable. Medichem will try to stop you, Rachel warned. Let them try. I have tenure, institutional backing, and a medical license they can't touch. They can sue me, but they can't silence me. And once the trial results are published, the truth gets out. Rachel felt hope kindle. Why are you doing this? What's in it for you? Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment. When I was in medical school, a friend of mine developed severe photosensitivity after a medication reaction. She couldn't go outside without full protective gear, couldn't live a normal life. She killed herself at 26 because the isolation was unbearable. If Dr. Vance's research can prevent that for even one person, it's worth every risk. Rachel sent him samples of Formula X, carefully packaged, thoroughly documented, shipped through a courier service with full chain of custody documentation. If Medichem tried to claim contamination or mishandling, she'd have proof of proper protocols. Dr. Chun received the samples and began recruiting trial participants, adults with various photosensitivity conditions. All informed consent, all voluntary, all properly compensated for their time. The trials would take months to complete, but they were running. The research was moving forward. Helena's work was finally reaching the world. Medichem noticed. Rachel received a letter from their legal team, more threatening than before. They were filing additional motions, claiming trade secret violations, demanding access to all research materials, insisting on immediate depositions. Sandra fought back, but the pressure was mounting. Legal fees were piling up faster than Rachel could track. The $17,000 Helena had left was gone. Sandra was working at reduced rates, but even reduced rates added up. Rachel needed money. She couldn't sell the research, couldn't mortgage the building, which was still condemned. She had nothing of value except the car and time. She got a job, not in her field, that would require disclosure about the legal battle, which most employers would see as a liability. Instead, she took night shifts at a grocery store, stocking shelves from midnight to 6 a.m. while Lily slept at the hotel. It was humiliating in some ways. Dr. Rachel Torres with a PhD scanning products and organizing inventory. But it was money. Minimum wage plus night differential. Almost enough to cover the hotel and food, while the legal fees consumed everything else. The babysitter, Mrs. Kowalski, agreed to stay overnight with Lily. She was retired, lived alone, and had grown attached to the quiet girl who read medical textbooks for fun and asked questions about how skin cells worked. "You're raising a scientist," Mrs. Kowalski told Rachel. "She's going to change the world someday." "I hope so," Rachel said. "I hope we're building a world where she can." 3 months into the clinical trials, Dr. Chun called with preliminary results. "Rachel, these compounds are extraordinary. We're seeing 95% UV protection with no adverse effects. Patients with severe photosensitivity are going outside for the first time in years. The data is preliminary, but this is game-changing." Rachel's hands shook. "Can you publish?" "I'm writing the paper now, submitting to the New England Journal of Medicine. This is too important to bury in a lesser publication. Medichem will go crazy," Rachel warned. "Let them. The scientific community needs to know this is possible, that effective photoprotection exists and works." The paper was submitted in January and accepted in March. Publication scheduled for May. Those 3 months were the longest of Rachel's life. Medichem escalated their legal assault, filing emergency motions to block publication, claiming the research violated their intellectual property, claiming Dr. Chun had been given proprietary information without authorization. Judge Morrison, the same judge who denied the preliminary injunction, denied their emergency motions as well. The research could be published. When the paper appeared in May, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Media coverage, medical conferences discussing the implications, patient advocacy groups demanding access to the compounds, and pharmaceutical companies calling Rachel, wanting to license the formulas, develop products, bring treatments to market. Everyone wanted a piece of what Helena had created. Rachel sat in the laboratory, surrounded by offers that would make her wealthy beyond anything she'd imagined, and thought about Helena's letter. "This is worth more than money, Rachel." She called a meeting with Holloway and Sandra. "We need to make a decision about how to move forward. I've been offered licensing deals worth tens of millions of dollars. But I keep thinking about what Helena wrote about choosing love and science, family and discovery. What are you thinking?" Sandra asked. "I'm thinking we don't license to the highest bidder. We create a nonprofit foundation. We make the research available through open licensing to any manufacturer who agrees to certain terms, affordable pricing, global distribution, no exclusivity deals that limit access." Holloway looked concerned. "That's admirable. But Rachel, you still have legal bills to pay. You're working night shifts at a grocery store. Don't you deserve financial security after everything you've been through?" Rachel looked at Lily, who was playing quietly in a corner, skin still pale and perfect because she still couldn't go outside safely. "Not yet. Not until the treatments were manufactured and widely available. If I take millions from one company for exclusive rights, how many Lilies around the world don't get access because it's not profitable to distribute in their countries? How many families like mine keep struggling because the treatment costs too much?" She took a breath. Helena spent 30 years fighting the idea that profit matters more than people. "I won't dishonor that by selling out now. We do this the right way, even if it's the hard way." Sandra smiled. "Then we structure the foundation carefully. Ensure sustainable funding through reasonable licensing fees. Protect your family financially while maintaining the mission of broad access." "Can we do that? Make it work without selling out?" "We could try," Holloway said. "It won't be easy, but when has anything about this been easy?" The next month was a whirlwind. Lawyers drafting foundation documents, negotiations with ethical manufacturers, press interviews where Rachel had to explain repeatedly that yes, she was giving away potential hundreds of millions of dollars because access mattered more than wealth. Some people called her a saint. Others called her an idiot. Rachel ignored both. She was neither. She was just a mother who'd been desperate and hopeless and homeless, who understood what it meant to have nothing and refused to build something new on the same broken foundation of profit over people. Medichem filed their final appeal in June. One last attempt to claim ownership of the research, to block the foundation, to suppress what they couldn't control. The hearing was scheduled for July. Rachel stood in front of Judge Morrison one final time, no longer wearing a borrowed suit, but a simple dress she'd bought with her grocery store paycheck. She looked exactly like what she was, a working mother fighting for her child. "Your Honor," Medicem's attorney argued, "Dr. Torres has proceeded recklessly with research that rightfully belongs to my client. She's published proprietary information, distributed compounds without proper authorization, and created a foundation based on stolen intellectual property. We're asking the court to award full ownership of all research materials to Medichem and to hold Dr. Torres liable for damages." Sandra stood. She'd grown into her role as David fighting Goliath, and she looked formidable. "Your Honor, every claim Medichem has made has been thoroughly debunked. Dr. Vance's research was independent, funded privately, conducted using novel methodologies. The clinical trials Dr. Torres facilitated were properly conducted with full IRB oversight. The foundation she's created will provide affordable access to life-saving treatments. Medichem isn't trying to protect innovation. They're trying to maintain a monopoly on less effective products that generate more profit." She presented the timeline Rachel had created, now expanded with expert testimony and evidence of Medicem's history of suppressing medical research. Dr. Vance spent 30 years hiding her work because she knew what Medichem would do. They proved her right by immediately trying to seize research they had no hand in creating. Dr. Torres has simply refused to let that suppression continue. Judge Morrison studied the documents for what felt like hours. Finally, she looked up. "I've reviewed all evidence presented by both parties. The original contract between Dr. Vance and Medichem Industries clearly established terms for the period of their professional relationship, but nothing in that contract grants Medichem perpetual rights to all work Dr. Vance conducted throughout her entire career. The research in question was developed independently, funded privately, using distinct methodologies from those employed under the original contract. Medichem's claims of ownership are without merit." Rachel's heart hammered. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, "I find that Medichem Industries has repeatedly acted in bad faith, attempting to suppress beneficial medical research to protect profit margins. This court cannot and will not enable such behavior." She looked directly at the Medichem attorneys. "Your claims are dismissed. Dr. Torres is the rightful owner of all research materials inherited from Dr. Helena Vance. The foundation she has created may proceed with development and distribution of treatments derived from that research." The courtroom erupted. Rachel couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she'd just heard. They'd won. After 17 months of fighting, of legal bills and threats and break-ins and pressure, they'd won. Sandra grabbed Rachel's hand, squeezed tight. "We did it. Helena's research is free." Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Rachel gave a brief statement, carefully prepared by Sandra. "Today's ruling affirms that medical research belongs to humanity, not to corporations who want to suppress it. My aunt, Dr. Helena Vance, dedicated her life to developing treatments that could help people with photosensitivity conditions. Now, through the Vance Torres Foundation, we'll make sure those treatments reach everyone who needs them, regardless of ability to pay." One reporter called out, "Dr. Torres, you could have made hundreds of millions from this research. Why give it away?" Rachel thought about sleeping in the car with Lily, about the desperation of having nothing, about every parent who'd ever had to choose between their child's medicine and rent. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing. Because my daughter deserves to play in the sun. Because Helena trusted me to do the right thing, not the profitable thing." She looked directly at the camera. "And because some things are more valuable than money." Some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The foundation launched in September. 3 manufacturers had agreed to produce Formula X, one under open licenses, with pricing caps that made it affordable globally. Distribution partnerships were in place for over 60 countries. And in October, after extensive additional safety testing and FDA approval for pediatric use, Rachel finally had enough data to make the decision she'd been holding her breath for. She sat Lily down in their new apartment, a small 2-bedroom place they could actually afford with Rachel's new salary as the foundation's research director, and held her daughter's hands. "Baby, I think we're ready to try the medicine. The one that might help you go outside." Lily's pink eyes went wide. "Really? Really? We'll start very slow, very carefully. But Lily, if this works, you might be able to play at the park, go to regular school, do everything other kids do." Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. "I want that, Mama. I want to be normal." "You are normal," Rachel said fiercely, "but I want you to be free." They started with tiny doses, topical application on small areas of skin, minimal sun exposure. Rachel monitored every second, documented every detail, ready to stop at the first sign of trouble. There was no trouble. Lily's skin, which had never tolerated direct sunlight, showed no damage after 5 minutes of exposure. Then 10. Then 20. By December, Lily was outside without full protective gear for the first time in her life. She ran in circles on the grass, laughing, her white hair catching winter sunlight that should have burned but didn't. "Mama, look, I'm not hurting." Rachel watched through tears, barely able to process what she was seeing. Her daughter, free, running and playing like any 7-year-old should. Other children approached, curious about the pale girl with pink eyes. Lily, who'd always been shy, greeted them with confidence born of no longer being afraid. They played for an hour. When they came inside, Lily's skin was still perfect, still undamaged. Formula X, one worked. For her daughter. For everyone. That evening, Rachel sat in the laboratory that had started everything, holding the journal where Helena had written about Formula X1. She turned to a blank page at the back and wrote her own entry. "Dear Helena, today Lily played outside for the first time in her life. She ran and laughed and was free. Because of you. Because you spent 30 years fighting when it would have been easier to give up. Because you believed the research mattered more than the consequences of protecting it. I'm not a saint like the media keeps saying. I'm just a mother who got lucky. You could have chosen anyone to inherit this. Any researcher with better credentials, better connections, more resources. But you chose the struggling single mom because you knew I'd fight for it the way you fought. Because I had no choice but to succeed. You were right. I couldn't afford to fail. Not with Lily depending on me. The foundation is growing faster than we expected. We've received grant applications from researchers in 43 countries. Every one of them wants to build on your work to expand photoprotection research in directions you never had time to explore. We're funding them. All of them. Because that's what you would have wanted. Not proprietary control, but collaboration. Not patents and exclusivity, but shared knowledge that makes everyone's work better. Medicam is appealing the judgment, of course. Their lawyers are persistent. But Sandra says we're on solid ground. More importantly, the treatments are out in the world now. Manufactured, distributed, saving lives. Even if they win on appeal somehow, they can't put that genie back in the bottle. I forgive you, by the way, for not being there when Mom was dying, for not reaching out when I needed help. I understand now what you were carrying, the weight of knowledge that could help millions, but that you couldn't share without destroying everything. You did the best you could with impossible choices. Just like I'm doing now. Lily asks about you sometimes. I show her pictures, tell her stories. She calls you the magic ant who made the sunshine safe. She wants to be a scientist like you when she grows up. Like both of us. I think you'd like that. Thank you for seeing in me what I couldn't see in myself. Thank you for trusting me with your life's work. Thank you for making sure my daughter gets to have a childhood. I won't let you down. With love and gratitude, Rachel. She closed the journal gently and returned it to its place among Helena's others. The laboratory hummed quietly around her, climate control, maintaining perfect conditions for research that was now being shared globally instead of hidden. Rachel's phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Chung at Stanford. Patient 47 just reported complete remission of photosensitivity symptoms after 6 months on Formula X. 1. She cried when I told her she could stop wearing protective clothing. So it was like being reborn. Rachel, we're changing lives here. Every single day. More texts followed. From manufacturer in India reporting they'd produced their millionth dose. From a clinic in Kenya treating children with albinism for the first time. From a support group for xeroderma pigmentosum patients celebrating members who could finally leave their houses during daylight hours. The research was spreading like Helena had dreamed it would. Unstoppable now. Too many people benefiting for any corporation to suppress it again. Rachel forwarded the messages to Sandra with a note. Evidence of impact for the appeal proceedings. Medicam can argue ownership all they want. Let them explain to a judge why they want to take life-saving treatments away from patients who are finally free. Sandra's response was immediate. Perfect. Building that angle into our brief now. They picked the wrong fight. Over the following weeks, Rachel settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable for the first time in years. She worked at the foundation during school hours while Lily attended a regular classroom for the first time. Her daughter was thriving, making friends, participating in outdoor recess without fear. The grocery store job was long gone, replaced by a modest but sufficient salary from the foundation. They had health insurance again. Rachel could afford Lily's medications without choosing between pills and rent. They had savings, actual savings in a bank account. It felt like science fiction after so many years of desperate poverty. But the work itself, that was what gave Rachel purpose beyond survival. Every day brought new requests for research collaborations, new applications of Helena's photoprotective compounds, new directions to explore. A researcher in Japan had modified Formula X, one to work with coral-safe ingredients, creating the first truly reef-friendly sunscreen that actually protected human skin effectively. A team in Brazil was testing whether the compounds could help with other UV-related conditions beyond photosensitivity, potentially preventing skin cancers and slowing photoaging. The Vance Torres Foundation reviewed every proposal, funded promising research, published results openly, so knowledge built on knowledge instead of being locked away in proprietary silos. This was Helena's vision realized, not individual brilliance hoarded behind patents, but collective advancement through shared discovery. Rachel hired staff carefully. The foundation needed expertise she didn't have, grant administrators, communications specialists, laboratory managers. But she insisted on one criterion beyond qualifications. Everyone who worked for the foundation had to believe that medical research was a public good, not a profit center. She found those people. They existed. Idealistic scientists tired of working for pharmaceutical companies that valued shareholder returns over patient outcomes. Grant makers frustrated by traditional foundations that moved too slowly and funded too conservatively. Communications experts who wanted to spread knowledge instead of spin. Together, they built something new, a foundation that moved fast, took risks, and measured success and lives improved rather than dollars earned. The first annual report was released in March, 1 year after Judge Morrison's ruling. The numbers were staggering. Formula X, one and its derivatives had reached 247,000 patients across 68 countries. Clinical trials showed 94% effectiveness in preventing UV-related skin damage. Patient surveys reported dramatic improvements in quality of life, with 89% saying the treatments had fundamentally changed their ability to participate in normal activities. The foundation had funded 73 research projects, published 31 papers in peer-reviewed journals, and established partnerships with 12 universities for continued photoprotection research. Manufacturing costs had dropped by 40% through economies of scale and process improvements, making treatments even more affordable. And perhaps most importantly, there had been no serious adverse effects reported in any patient population. The compounds were safe, effective, and now proven at scale. Media coverage was extensive. Rachel did interviews carefully, always redirecting attention from herself to Helena, to the patients whose lives had changed, to the collaborative research model that made everything possible. One interview stood out. A journalist from The Atlantic wanted to write a long-form piece about the woman who gave away $500 million to make medicine affordable. Rachel met her at a coffee shop near the Foundation's new headquarters, a modest office building that was practical rather than impressive. The journalist, Melissa Kim, had done her homework. She knew about the homelessness, the legal battles, the grocery store job while fighting Medicam. Most people would have taken the licensing deals, Melissa said, made themselves wealthy, retired comfortably. Why didn't you? Rachel thought about how to answer honestly without sounding self-righteous. I didn't give away $500 million. I never had $500 million. I had research that could help people. The choice wasn't between wealth and poverty. It was between hoarding something valuable or sharing it. But you're not wealthy now, Melissa pressed. You live in a modest apartment, drive a used car, work full-time in a nonprofit. You could have had financial security for life. I have security, Rachel said. My daughter has medicine that lets her live normally. We have an apartment where we don't worry about eviction. I have work that matters. That's security. The rest is just excess. Do you ever regret it? Wonder what life would be like if you'd made different choices. Rachel looked out the window where Lily was visible on the playground across the street, running with other children in full afternoon sunlight, her pale skin protected by Formula X. Never, she said. Not once. The Atlantic piece ran in May with the headline, "The Accidental Revolutionary." How a homeless single mother transformed medical research by refusing to profit from it. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured into the foundation from people inspired by the story. Other wealthy individuals reached out, wanting to fund similar open research models in different medical fields. A billionaire tech entrepreneur who'd made his fortune in software called Rachel directly. Dr. Torres, I made $3 billion selling a company. I've been trying to figure out how to give it away effectively without just creating another bureaucratic foundation that accomplishes nothing. I want to do what you did. Can you help me? Rachel met with him, shared the foundation's operating principles, introduced him to Sandra, who could help structure things legally. Within 6 months, he created the Open Medical Research Initiative, funding open-source drug development with $1 billion endowment. Other philanthropists followed. A movement was building, but not everyone was supportive. Medicam's appeal was still pending, and their PR campaign painted Rachel as a dangerous idealist who'd stolen proprietary research and endangered public safety by rushing untested compounds to market. The attacks got personal. Anonymous online comments questioned her credentials, her parenting, her motives. Someone leaked her address, and she started receiving threatening letters. One claimed to know where Lily went to school. Rachel reported everything to the police, installed better security at home, but refused to be intimidated. She'd faced homelessness and legal threats from a Fortune 500 company. Internet trolls didn't scare her. The appeals court hearing was scheduled for September, 18 months after Judge Morrison's initial ruling. This time, the stakes felt different. The treatments were out in the world, helping hundreds of thousands. Surely even Medicam couldn't argue that success should be undone. But they tried. Their argument was technical, focused on contract law and intellectual property precedent rather than patient outcomes. They claimed the original contract gave them rights to derivative research regardless of when or how it was conducted. They cited cases where similar contracts have been enforced even decades later. Sandra countered with patient testimony. Real people whose lives have been transformed by access to affordable photoprotection. A mother whose child with xeroderma pigmentosum could finally attend school. A construction worker with severe photosensitivity who could work outside again. An elderly woman whose skin cancer had been prevented by early intervention with Formula X. The judges listened impassively. Impossible to read their reactions. The ruling came down in November. Rachel was in a laboratory when Sandra called, voice tight with emotion. We won. Not just won, Rachel. They didn't just uphold the lower court ruling. They went further. The appeals court ruled that contracts attempting to claim perpetual ownership of an entire field of research are unconscionable restraints on trade and against public policy. This sets precedent. Pharmaceutical companies can't use employment contracts to prevent researchers from ever working in their fields again. Medichem doesn't just lose this case. They lose the ability to do this to anyone else. Rachel sat down hard, overwhelmed. It's over? Medichem could appeal to the Supreme Court, but Sandra's voice held barely contained joy. But our chances of them taking the case are minimal. For all practical purposes, yes. It's over. You won. Helena won. That evening, Rachel took Lily to the beach. Something they'd never done before, never dared a risk. But now, with Formula X, one protecting her daughter's skin, it was possible. Lily ran shrieking into the waves, arms outstretched, absolutely fearless. The setting sun painted the sky orange and pink, and Rachel stood at the water's edge, watching her daughter experience freedom for the first time. Other families were packing up, heading home as the light faded. A mother with a toddler stopped beside Rachel. "Your daughter is beautiful," she said, watching Lily splash. "The albinism, it's striking." "Thank you," Rachel said. She's finally able to enjoy the beach without risk. The woman smiled. "I saw the article about you in the Atlantic. About the foundation. My sister has lupus with severe photosensitivity. She's been using your Formula X, one, for 6 months. It changed her life. So thank you. Thank you for choosing to share instead of profit." She walked away before Rachel could respond, leaving her standing in the surf with tears streaming down her face. This was what mattered. Not the legal victories or the media coverage or the accolades from the scientific community. This random mother whose sister was helped by research that almost died with Helena. Lily ran back, dripping seawater, grinning. "Mama, can we come back tomorrow?" "We can come back whenever you want," Rachel promised. "The beach isn't dangerous for you anymore." That night, back at their apartment, Rachel updated the journal entry she'd written to Helena. "We did it. Medichem appealed, and we won again. The research is protected now, not just for us, but for everyone. No pharmaceutical company can lock away medical breakthroughs anymore, at least not as easily." More importantly, Lily went to the beach today. She played in the waves at sunset. She was safe and happy and free. You gave us that. You, who never met her, who watched from a distance while your mind slowly failed. You protected this research knowing you wouldn't live to see it help anyone. But it's helping everyone now. 250,000 patients and growing. All because you refused to let corporate greed bury science that could save lives. I wish you could see what you started. The foundation is funding research you never imagined. The open-source medical movement is spreading. Other philanthropists are following your model. You were right about everything. About choosing family over profit. About standing firm against people who valued money over human life. About trusting me with something precious. I won't let this become what you feared, another tool for profit. The Vance Torres Foundation will always put patients first, always share knowledge freely. Always remember that some things are too important to own. Lily calls herself the Sun Girl now. She's not afraid anymore. She's just a kid who happens to have albinism, not a patient defined by her condition. That's your legacy. Not the formulas or the patents or the foundation's asset value. The freedom you gave to children who thought sunshine was their enemy. Thank you. For everything. Forever. Rachel. The foundation's second year brought new challenges. Success created demand they struggled to meet. More research proposals than they could fund. More patients requesting treatment access than manufacturers could supply. Growing pains that required solutions they were making up as they went. Rachel hired consultants, built infrastructure, created systems. The scrappy startup feeling gave way to actual organizational structure. They needed it. The foundation was managing $50 million in annual research grants, coordinating manufacturing across 3 continents, tracking patient outcomes for ongoing safety monitoring. But Rachel insisted on keeping some of the original spirit. Every Friday, she spent at least 2 hours in the laboratory doing actual research. Not administration, not strategic planning, but hands-on scientific work. She was currently exploring whether photoprotective compounds could be engineered to target specific wavelengths, blocking harmful UV while allowing beneficial light through for vitamin D synthesis. Lily sometimes joined her, carefully pipetting solutions under Rachel's supervision, asking questions about molecular structure and cellular mechanisms. At 8 years old, she understood photochemistry better than most adults. "My science baby," Mrs. Kowalski called her affectionately. The babysitter still came by regularly, though now as friend rather than necessity. "Emma's going to cure cancer someday," Mrs. Kowalski predicted. "Mark my words. Lily wants to cure albinism," Rachel corrected gently. "She's very focused on that." "Same difference," Mrs. Kowalski said with a shrug. "Point is, that girl's going to change the world. Just like her mama." "I didn't change the world," Rachel protested. "I just refused to let someone else's greed stop necessary research." "Exactly," Mrs. Kowalski said. "That's what changing the world looks like. One stubborn choice at a time." Medichem filed for bankruptcy in March of the foundation's third year. Years of declining sunscreen sales, combined with massive legal fees and the loss of their ability to suppress competitive research, had destroyed their business model. Their assets were liquidated. The intellectual property they'd hoarded for decades was released. Other researchers could finally build on work that had been locked away for 30 years. Rachel felt no satisfaction in their downfall. The people who made the suppression decisions had long since retired wealthy. It was current employees, innocent of those old crimes, who lost jobs when the company collapsed. But the research that emerged from their vaults was staggering. Not just photo protection, but advances in wound healing, scar reduction, skin cancer treatment. All of it buried because it might reduce demand for existing products. The Vance Torres Foundation partnered with 3 universities to review and publish this liberated research, making it available to the global scientific community, letting progress resume where Medichem had frozen it. Some of the former Medichem researchers reached out to Rachel, apologetic and angry. "We knew," one told her. "We knew what the company was doing, how they were suppressing beneficial research. But we had families, mortgages, student loans. We couldn't afford to speak out." "I understand," Rachel said, and she did. Principle was easier to maintain when you didn't have a child depending on you. She'd made brave choices about Helena's research, but she'd also been desperate enough that she had nothing left to lose. The researchers joined the Foundation's network, contributing expertise without corporate pressure to prioritize profit over patients. By the 4th anniversary of inheriting Helena's estate, Rachel could look back and see clearly how far they'd come. The scared, homeless woman sleeping in her car felt like a different person. That Rachel had been broken by circumstance, ground down by impossible choices. This Rachel had purpose, resources, and impact. She'd helped over 500,000 patients, published research that moved science forward, created an organizational model that others were replicating globally. And most importantly, she'd given her daughter a normal childhood. Lily attended regular school, had friends, played outside, dreamed about a future that wasn't constrained by her condition. The annual gala celebrating the Foundation's work had grown from a small gathering to a major event. Donors, researchers, and patients filled a ballroom at a San Diego hotel. Rachel gave a short speech, as she did every year, but this time she brought Lily on stage with her. "For years ago," she told the crowd, "I was homeless with a sick child and no hope. My aunt, Dr. Helena Vance, left me research she protected for 30 years. Research that powerful interests try to suppress. I could have sold it, made myself wealthy, insured my daughter, and I would never struggle again." She put her hand on Lily's shoulder. "But I looked at this amazing kid, and I thought about all the other children like her around the world. All the parents lying awake at night, wondering how they'd pay for medicine or protect their children from conditions that made normal life impossible. And I realized I couldn't take the money. Couldn't prioritize my security over their suffering. Had to share what Helena had given me, even though it meant continuing to struggle, continuing to fight, continuing to risk everything." She paused, letting the room feel the weight of that choice. Today, over 500,000 patients have access to affordable photoprotective treatments. Children with albinism can go outside. Adults with photosensitivity can work, travel, live fully. All because we chose to share rather than hoard. That's Helena's legacy. That's what the Vance Torres Foundation represents. The radical belief that medical breakthroughs belong to humanity, not to whoever can afford exclusive rights. The room rose in applause. Lily waved shyly, overwhelmed by the attention but proud. Afterward, a young woman approached Rachel. She was maybe 19, with the pale skin and pink eyes of albinism, wearing clothes that showed she no longer feared sunlight. Dr. Torres, I just wanted to thank you. I've had albinism my whole life. Spent 18 years hiding from the sun from normal life. I was planning to skip college because most campuses are too open, too sunny. Then I got access to Formula X1. Suddenly, I could walk across campus, could study outside, could live. I just finished my first year at UC Berkeley, majoring in biochemistry. Because of you. Rachel hugged her, tears streaming. Because of Helena. Because she never gave up. No, the young woman said firmly. Because of you. Helena created the research. But you fought to share it. You could have kept it locked away like Medicam wanted. You chose to give it to people like me. That's everything. She chose me not because I was the most qualified inheritor, but because she knew I would need her research desperately enough to fight for it the way she had fought. She was right. I couldn't afford to fail. My daughter's life depended on success. Rachel held up the medal. This doesn't belong to Helena alone. It belongs to every researcher who's been pressured to suppress beneficial discoveries for profit. Every scientist who's chosen principle over career advancement. Every person who's refused to let greed win. And it belongs to the patients whose lives have been transformed by accessible photoprotection. You're why this work matters. You're why we fight. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Later, at the formal dinner, other Nobel laureates approached Rachel with congratulations and questions about the open research model. Several expressed interest in applying similar principles to their own fields. A physicist working on climate change solutions wanted to know how to make breakthrough technology accessible to developing nations without patent restrictions. A chemist researching water purification sought advice on avoiding corporate capture of innovations that could save millions. Rachel shared what she'd learned, connected them with Sandra and Holloway, helped them think through structures that could protect important research while ensuring broad access. The movement was spreading far beyond medicine now. Into physics, chemistry, engineering, agriculture. The fundamental question was the same everywhere. How do we ensure that human knowledge benefits humanity rather than enriching whoever claims ownership first? Back home after the ceremony, Rachel added one final entry to the journal she'd been keeping for Helena. You won the Nobel Prize. I wish you could have been there to accept it yourself, to hear the applause, to be recognized for brilliance the world tried to forget. But in a way, you were there. Every patient whose life you saved. Every researcher building on your work. Every parent who doesn't have to watch their child suffer anymore. That's your presence. That's your legacy made visible. The foundation is sustainable now. Strong enough to outlive my directorship someday. Other organizations are replicating the model. The movement toward open research is growing beyond what either of us imagined. Lily wants to be a scientist. She's already reading your journals, understanding your work at a level that amazes me. I think she'll go further than both of us. Build on what we started and create something even more revolutionary. That's what you fought for, isn't it? Not just to save one generation, but to create conditions where the next generation could do even more. You gave us that gift. Knowledge, yes, but more importantly, you gave us an example. You showed that one person's stubborn refusal to compromise can change everything. I hope, wherever you are, you know what you accomplished. Not just the science, though that was extraordinary, but the proof that some things are too important to sell, too valuable to lock away, too essential to let profit motives corrupt. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for waiting until the timing was right. Thank you for believing a desperate single mom could be the guardian your research needed. I didn't disappoint you. We've made sure your work reached everyone who needed it, exactly as you hoped. Rest well, knowing your legacy is secure and growing. With love, gratitude, and the promise to keep fighting for what you believed in, Rachel. She closed the journal and placed on the shelf beside the Nobel medal two symbols of a life spent in service of science and humanity. Outside, Lily called from her bedroom. "Mama, come look at the experiment I designed." Rachel smiled and went to see what her 8-year-old scientist daughter had created now. The future was bright, and for the first time in so many years, that wasn't terrifying. It was hopeful. The Torres Foundation's work would continue. The research would expand. The treatments would reach more people. The model would spread. And somewhere, Rachel liked to think, Helena was watching with satisfaction, knowing that her stubborn refusal to let corporations suppress life-saving research had created ripples that would echo through generations. Some legacies are measured in wealth. Helena's was measured in freedom, in children who could play outside, in families who didn't have to choose between medicine and rent, in a world that was slightly better because one woman refused to give up. That was worth more than any amount of money. That was priceless. She walked away, leaving Rachel overwhelmed by the reality of impact. That wasn't abstract patient numbers or clinical trial data. That was a real person whose life trajectory had changed because of choices Rachel had made. The Foundation's work continued expanding. They'd moved beyond photoprotection into related fields, funding research on treatments for other genetic skin conditions, on affordable wound care, on accessible dermatological interventions for underserved populations. Every project followed the same model: open research, collaborative development, maximum access at minimum cost. It was working, not just the Foundation, but the larger movement they'd helped inspire. Dozens of organizations now operated on open-source medical research principles. Billions in philanthropic capital was flowing toward accessible treatment development rather than profit-maximizing drug design. The pharmaceutical industry was changing, slowly but measurably, not because companies had sudden moral awakenings, but because the economic model was shifting. Patients were demanding access. Researchers were choosing meaningful work over high salaries at predatory companies. Philanthropists were funding alternatives to the traditional patent and profit system. Helena had started this by refusing to compromise her research integrity. Rachel had accelerated it by refusing to profit from inheritance. Now it was becoming something larger than either of them. A genuine transformation in how medical research could be conducted and shared. As the Foundation's 5th year began, Rachel finally felt like she could breathe. The legal battles were over. The research was protected. The treatments were reaching everyone who needed them. Lily was thriving. She'd been invited to speak at medical conferences, to advise other foundations, to write about the open research model. But mostly, she just wanted to do the science. To continue Helena's work of discovery and application. One evening, working late in the laboratory, Rachel received an email from the Nobel Committee. They were awarding Helena Vance the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, posthumously, for her revolutionary work in photoprotective compounds. Rachel read the email 3 times, crying so hard she could barely see the screen. Helena had been forgotten by the scientific community, had died alone with most of her peers believing she'd given up and retired in failure. Now she was being recognized with science's highest honor. The awards ceremony would be in December in Stockholm. As Helena's heir and the person who'd brought her research to the world, Rachel was invited to accept on her behalf. She called Lily into the laboratory. "Baby, I have something to tell you. Your Aunt Helena, the scientist who made the medicine that helps you, she's being given an incredibly important award." Lily's eyes widened. "Like a prize?" "The biggest prize in science. It's called the Nobel Prize. Very few people ever win it. And Aunt Helena is being honored for her work on photoprotection." Lily processed this seriously. "The work that made me able to go outside?" "Exactly. She was really smart," Lily said with certainty. "She was brilliant," Rachel agreed. "And brave. And stubborn. She spent her whole life fighting for what she believed in, even when it was hard. Like you, Mama." Rachel pulled her daughter close. "Like both of us. We don't give up when things matter." They flew to Stockholm in December. Lily's first trip outside the country. First time experiencing winter in a northern city where sunlight was weak and brief, even at midday. She could be outside all day without risk. The Nobel ceremony was overwhelming. Rachel wore a borrowed gown, still uncomfortable with formal events and attention. But she walked onto that stage and accepted the medal on Helena's behalf with pride. In her acceptance speech, she told Helena's story. The brilliant researcher whose work was suppressed. The woman who spent 30 years protecting knowledge that could help millions. The aunt who watched from a distance and trusted a struggling niece with her life's legacy. Dr. Vance could have given up when her research was buried by corporate interests, Rachel said. She could have walked away when legal threats made continuing dangerous. Instead, she went underground, worked alone, documented everything meticulously, and waited for the right moment to release it all. And Rachel, who'd once had nothing but a dying car and desperate hope, now had everything that actually mattered. Purpose, impact, and the knowledge that her daughter would grow up in a world where medical care was a right, not a privilege. That was Helena's gift. Not just the research, but the possibility of a different future. And Rachel had made sure that gift reached everyone it was meant to help. The years that followed the Nobel Prize ceremony brought changes Rachel had never anticipated. The foundation that had started as a desperate fight to protect Helena's research evolved into something far more significant. A model for how medical innovation could serve humanity instead of extracting profit from suffering. By the Foundation's 7th year, they'd expanded beyond photoprotection into a broader mission of accessible dermatological care. The original research facility, once a condemned ruin, had been completely rebuilt with insurance money and foundation funds. It now housed state-of-the-art laboratories, training facilities for researchers from developing nations, and a clinic that provided free treatment to patients who couldn't afford care elsewhere. The building that Medicam had tried to have demolished was now saving lives daily. Rachel walked through the renovated facility one morning, marveling at the transformation. Where graffiti-covered walls had been, there were now clean white surfaces displaying Helena's original research journals and climate control cases. Where broken equipment had littered the floor, cutting-edge technology hummed efficiently. And in the basement, Helena's original laboratory remained preserved exactly as she'd left it, a museum to one woman's stubborn refusal to let corporate greed win. Tour groups came regularly, medical students and researchers who wanted to see where the revolution in open-source medical research had begun. Rachel sometimes led the tours herself, telling Helena's story to wide-eyed students who'd grown up in a world with advanced Torres model was becoming standard practice. They'd ask questions about the legal battles, the threats, the years of hiding research that could have helped millions. And Rachel would tell them honestly about the fear, the doubt, the nights when she'd wondered if fighting was worth the cost. But then I'd look at Lily, she'd tell them, and I'd remember why none of us can afford to let fear win. My daughter deserved a chance at a normal life. So did hundreds of thousands of other children around the world. That was worth any risk. Lily was 14 now, tall and confident, her albinism a characteristic rather than a disability. She attended a competitive science high school, had been accepted into a summer research program at MIT, and spoke matter-of-factly about her plans to study biochemistry and continue Helena's work. She also volunteered at the Foundation's clinic every Saturday, helping younger children with photosensitive conditions understand their treatment options. Rachel would watch her daughter explain molecular structures to 8-year-olds, making complex science accessible and exciting, and see Helena's legacy alive in new ways. "You're a born teacher," Rachel told her after one particularly animated explanation of how UV radiation damaged DNA. Lily shrugged, embarrassed by the compliment. "I just remember what it was like not understanding why I was different. If I can help other kids get it, maybe they won't be as scared as I was." "You were never scared," Rachel said. "You were the bravest kid I knew." "Only because you were braver," Lily countered. "You had everything to lose, and you still fought. That's what I want to be like." The Foundation's impact had grown exponentially. What had started with Formula X, one in photoprotection, had expanded into multiple research streams. They were funding work on affordable treatments for eczema, psoriasis, vitiligo, and dozens of other dermatological conditions that disproportionately affected poor communities who couldn't access expensive specialty care. Every project followed the same principles Helena had established: open research, collaborative development, maximum access at minimum cost, no patents that locked away knowledge, no exclusive licenses that inflated prices, just science in service of human welfare. The model had proven not just ethical, but economically sustainable. The foundation's endowment had grown to over $200 million through strategic investment and continued donations from people who believed in the mission. They could fund research indefinitely, growing impact year after year, without depending on pharmaceutical company partnerships that came with strings attached. Other organizations had replicated the approach. The Open Medical Research Initiative that the billionaire tech entrepreneur had started was now larger than the Torres Foundation, funding breakthrough research in oncology, cardiology, and infectious disease. Similar foundations had emerged in Europe, Asia, and Africa. The movement had its own conference now, the Global Summit on Accessible Medical Research, held annually in different countries. Rachel had been asked to give the keynote address at this year's summit in Geneva. She spent weeks preparing the speech, wanting to honor Helena's memory while acknowledging all the researchers, patients, and advocates who'd built on that foundation. The night before her presentation, she couldn't sleep. She stood at the hotel window overlooking Lake Geneva, thinking about the journey from sleeping in a car to addressing an international conference about transforming medical research. Her phone rang. Holloway, calling from San Diego despite the time difference. Rachel, I wanted to reach you before your speech tomorrow. I just received word that Medicam's final appeal was denied by the Supreme Court. They refused to hear the case. It's completely over now. Rachel sat down heavily on the bed. After all these years, 7 years of appeals and legal maneuvering, Holloway confirmed. But it's finished. The precedent is set. Employment contracts can't be used to suppress an entire field of research. Helena's work is protected permanently. And more importantly, other researchers are protected too. Do they have to pay damages? Rachel asked. The court upheld the original ruling, including attorney fees. Medicam's bankruptcy estate will pay $2.7 million to cover our legal costs over the years. Sandra's bill is finally settled in full. Rachel felt something release in her chest, tension she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. It's really over. It's really over, Holloway confirmed. You won, Rachel. Completely, definitively, permanently. Helena's legacy is secure. After the call ended, Rachel pulled out the journal she still kept, writing entries to Helena whenever major events occurred. She wrote about the Supreme Court decision, about the speech she'd give tomorrow, about Lily's plans to continue the work. And she wrote about gratitude. Thank you for seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself. Thank you for trusting me with something so precious. Thank you for refusing to give up, even when giving up would have been easier. Because you didn't give up, hundreds of thousands of people have better lives. That's legacy. That's immortality. The keynote speech went well. Rachel spoke to an audience of over 2,000 researchers, philanthropists, and policymakers about the journey from condemned building to global movement. She showed photographs of the original laboratory, of Helena's journals, of Lily playing outside for the first time. But mostly, she talked about choice. We're told that medical research requires profit motive, that innovation only happens when there's financial incentive, that patents and exclusivity are necessary to fund development. Helena proved that was a lie. She spent 30 years developing revolutionary treatments with no expectation of profit, motivated purely by the desire to solve a problem that was causing suffering. Rachel paused, making eye contact with people throughout the audience. The question isn't whether we can afford to make research accessible. It's whether we can afford not to. Every day that life-saving treatments are locked behind patents and pricing that excludes most of humanity is a day we choose profit over people. That's a choice. We can make different choices. The standing ovation lasted over 5 minutes. Afterward, dozens of researchers approached her with questions about implementing the model in their fields, with stories about how the Torres Foundation had influenced their work, with gratitude for proving that another way was possible. A young woman, maybe 25, waited until most of the crowd had dispersed before approaching. She had the pale skin and pink eyes of albinism. Dr. Torres, I wanted to thank you. I was one of the first patients in Dr. Chen's clinical trials 7 years ago. I was 18 and terrified of going to college because most campuses were too sunny. Formula X, one changed my life. Rachel had heard variations of this story hundreds of times, but it never stopped moving her. I'm so glad it helped. The young woman continued. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you. I'm finishing my PhD in biochemistry now. My dissertation is on expanding photoprotective compounds to work for darker skin tones that current formulations don't serve well enough. I'm doing this research because you showed me it was possible to be a scientist and also insist that science serve everyone. She pulled out a bound document. I wanted to give you the first copy and to ask if the Vance Torres Foundation would consider funding the next phase of research. I want to make photoprotection truly universal, accessible to every skin type, every ethnic background, every economic situation. Rachel took the dissertation with shaking hands. This is exactly what Helena would have wanted. Yes, absolutely yes. Submit a formal proposal to the foundation. We'll make this happen. After the young woman left, Rachel sat in the empty conference hall and cried. This was the multiplication of impact Helena had dreamed of. Not just direct result from her research, but inspiring new generations to tackle problems she'd never had time to solve. The foundation funded the young researcher's work. Within 2 years, she developed formulations optimized for melanin-rich skin, addressing a gap in photoprotection that had disadvantaged billions of people. Those formulations were released under the same open access model, immediately available to manufacturers worldwide. The cycle continued. Research building on research, each breakthrough shared freely, each innovation multiplying impact instead of consolidating profit. Rachel stepped down as the foundation's executive director on the 10th anniversary of inheriting Helena's estate. Not retiring, but transitioning to chief scientific officer, a role that let her focus on research rather than administration. The new director was Dr. James Chun, the Stanford dermatologist who'd run the first clinical trials. He understood the mission deeply and had the management skills to scale impact even further. At the transition ceremony, Rachel gave a brief speech to the foundation's staff and board. 10 years ago, I was homeless with a sick child and no idea how to survive another day. Helena's inheritance saved us, yes, but more importantly, it gave us purpose. It showed me that the worst circumstances can become opportunities to create something meaningful if you're willing to fight for it. She looked around the room at faces that had become family. People who'd joined the foundation because they believed in the mission, who'd worked for less money than they could earn elsewhere because impact mattered more than salary. I'm not leaving. I'm just shifting focus to what I love most, the science. Dr. Chun will lead us into the next decade, and I have complete confidence that the foundation will continue growing, continue innovating, continue proving that accessible medical research isn't just idealistic, it's practical and sustainable. But I want to say something to everyone here. What we've built matters because we've stayed true to Helena's vision. We've never compromised accessibility for profit. We've never chosen the easy path when the right path was harder. And we've created something that will outlive all of us. That's legacy. Not monuments or named buildings, though we have those, but a model that's changed how medical research can be conducted globally. A proof that humanity's knowledge can serve humanity's needs. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for believing it was possible. The ceremony ended with the unveiling of a statue in the facility's courtyard. Helena Vance, rendered in bronze, sitting at a laboratory bench with research journals spread before her. The inscription read, "Some discoveries are too important to hide." Dr. Helena Vance, 1952 to 2019. Scientist, revolutionary, believer in accessible medicine. Lily, now 15, stood beside Rachel looking at her gray-tanned statue. "Did you ever get to meet her?" she asked. "Once when I was 10. She was brilliant and intimidating and kind in a way that was hard to see at first. I wish I could have known her," Lily said. "You do know her," Rachel said, pulling her daughter close. "Every time you explain science to younger kids at the clinic, every time you insist that research should be shared, not hoarded, Every time you choose impact over ease, you're channeling Helena. She's in you, in both of us. The Foundation's second decade brought new challenges. Pharmaceutical companies, watching their profit margins shrink as more research became open access, began lobbying for legislation that would restrict the model. They argued that without patent protection, innovation would cease, that the open access movement was naive idealism that would ultimately harm patients by reducing investment in drug development. Rachel was asked to testify before Congress about the Torres model and its impact. She prepared meticulously, gathering data on patient outcomes, research productivity, cost savings to healthcare systems, and innovation rates. The numbers told an unambiguous story. Open access medical research was producing more breakthroughs, reaching more patients, and doing so at a fraction of the cost of traditional proprietary development. The hearing was contentious. Pharmaceutical lobbyists presented cherry-picked data suggesting the open access model was unsustainable. Rachel countered with comprehensive evidence of success. One senator, clearly sympathetic to industry interests, pressed her aggressively. "Dr. Torres, you're asking us to believe that researchers will innovate without profit motive. That goes against basic economic principles." Rachel met his eyes steadily. "Senator, Helena Vance developed revolutionary treatments while earning no profit. I've expanded that research while taking a modest nonprofit salary. Dr. Chun and dozens of other researchers have made breakthrough discoveries motivated by the desire to help patients, not maximize returns." She pulled up a slide showing patient access statistics. Under the proprietary model, only 15% of patients with photosensitive conditions could afford effective treatment. Under our model, that's increased to 87% globally. Which system better serves the public interest? The senator tried another angle. "But what about the research and development costs? Private companies invest billions in drug development. Most of those billions go to marketing, not research," Rachel countered. "The Vance Torres Foundation spends 87% of our budget directly on research and patient access. Private pharmaceutical companies spend approximately 25% on research and 30% on marketing. We're more efficient precisely because we're not trying to maximize profit." The testimony went on for hours. By the end, several senators who'd started skeptical were asking questions about how to expand the model, how to encourage more open access research, how to reduce dependence on proprietary drug development. The legislation the pharmaceutical companies had been pushing died in committee. Instead, Congress passed the Medical Research Accessibility Act, providing tax incentives for organizations that released research under open access terms. The Vance Torres Foundation had helped shift national policy. Rachel returned home exhausted, but satisfied. Lily, now in her first year at MIT studying biochemistry, called that evening. "Mom, I saw the hearing video. You destroyed them." "I presented facts," Rachel corrected. "They destroyed themselves by defending a system that obviously prioritizes profit over patients." "Same thing," Lily laughed. "But seriously, I'm proud of you. You and Aunt Helena, you're changing how the whole world thinks about medical research." "We're trying," Rachel said. "But Lily, the real change comes from your generation. People like you who grew up seeing that another model is possible, who won't accept the old ways just because that's how it's always been done. That's why I'm going into this field," Lily said. "I want to continue what you started. Find new ways to make medicine accessible. Develop treatments for conditions that pharmaceutical companies ignore because they're not profitable enough." Rachel felt her throat tighten with pride and love. "Helena would be so proud of you." "She is proud of me," Lily said with certainty. "I feel it, like she's watching somehow, seeing that her work mattered, that it's growing into something even bigger than she imagined." After the call, Rachel returned to Helena's original laboratory in the basement of the research facility. She came here sometimes when she needed to think, to remember why the fight mattered, to reconnect with the stubborn determination that had driven Helena through 30 years of isolation and secrecy. The space was preserved exactly as it had been when Rachel first discovered it. The equipment still in place, the journals still on the shelves, the vials still in the refrigeration units, though their contents had long since been synthesized and distributed globally. Rachel sat at Helena's desk and opened the final journal, reading the last entry Helena had written before dementia made continued work impossible. I'm losing words now, forgetting names, faces, entire decades of memory. But the science remains clear. The formulas are still perfect in my mind, even as everything else fades. Perhaps that's the universe's gift, letting me hold onto what matters most until I can pass it on. I've done everything I can to protect this work. Hidden it, documented it, structured the inheritance to give Rachel the best chance of success. Now it's out of my hands. Either she'll find the strength to fight for it, or everything I've worked for will be buried with me. I have to trust. Trust that I chose the right person. Trust that love for her daughter will overcome fear of powerful enemies. Trust that one woman's stubborn refusal to compromise can still matter in a world that seems determined to crush idealism. If you're reading this, Rachel, then I was right to trust. Thank you for being stronger than I ever was. Thank you for sharing what I was too afraid to release while alive. Thank you for proving that some legacies are worth fighting for. Love, always, Helena. Rachel closed the journal and sat in the quiet laboratory, thinking about trust and legacy and the unexpected ways lives intersect across time and distance. Helena had trusted her sight unseen, based on nothing but a memory of a curious 10-year-old and reports about a struggling single mother who chose her daughter's welfare over her own comfort. That trust had changed everything. Now Rachel was being trusted by a new generation of researchers who looked to the Torres Foundation as proof that ethical science was possible. That trust carried its own weight, its own responsibility. She pulled out her phone and recorded a video message, something she'd been thinking about for a while. My name is Dr. Rachel Torres. If you're watching this, I'm probably gone, and you're someone tasked with continuing the Torres Foundation's work. I want to tell you something important. This foundation exists because my Aunt Helena refused to compromise her principles, even when compromise would have been easier, safer, more profitable. She spent 30 years protecting research that could have made her wealthy if she'd sold it, famous if she'd published it, comfortable if she'd simply stopped caring. She didn't stop caring, and when she died, she trusted me to carry that stubbornness forward. I was homeless when I inherited her research, desperate, afraid, completely unprepared for the fight that was coming. But I had something Helena couldn't have predicted. I had a daughter whose life depended on the treatments Helena had developed. Failure wasn't an option. Rachel paused, collecting her thoughts. If you're watching this, you probably face your own version of that fight. Pressure to compromise accessibility for profit. Temptation to take the easier path. Powerful interests arguing that the open access model is unsustainable or naive. Don't believe them. We've proven for over 2 decades that accessible medical research works, that it's more efficient, more innovative, and more ethical than proprietary development. The only people who benefit from the old model are shareholders. Everyone else, researchers, patients, society, benefits from openness. Stay stubborn. Trust in the mission. Remember that every patient who can afford treatment because of patent restrictions is a person, not an abstraction. Someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone who deserves care regardless of their ability to pay. Helena died believing this was possible. I've spent my adult life proving it. Now it's your turn to carry it forward. Don't let us down. She saved the video to be included in the Foundation's succession planning documents, alongside legal protections, financial structures, and operational protocols. Future directors would inherit not just an organization, but a legacy of principled defiance. The Foundation's 15th anniversary celebration was held at the rebuilt research facility. Over 1,000 people attended, researchers who've been funded by the Foundation, patients whose lives have been transformed by accessible treatments, advocates who'd adopted the open access model in other fields. Rachel moved through the crowd, greeting old friends and meeting new ones. Dr. Chun, now the Foundation's director for 5 years, had expanded operations beyond anything Rachel had imagined. They were funding research in 30 countries, had established partnerships with over 200 universities, and had helped bring 87 new treatments to market under open access terms. The young researcher whose work on photoprotection for darker skin tones Rachel had funded was now leading a team of 15 scientists, developing next-generation compounds that address skincare needs pharmaceutical companies had ignored for decades because the patient populations weren't wealthy enough to be profitable. Mrs. Kowalski, now in her 80s, sat in a place of honor at the celebration. She'd become like a grandmother to Lily, had been there for every milestone, every achievement, every challenge. "You did it," she told Rachel during a quiet moment. "You took something that could have destroyed you and turned it into something that saves lives every day. That's extraordinary." "Helena did it," Rachel corrected. "I just refused to let her work die with her." "No," Mrs. Kowalski said firmly. "Helena created the research. You created the revolution. There's a difference." Lily, now 19 and home from MIT for the summer, gave a speech about growing up as the daughter of both the foundation and a mother who'd fought impossible battles to ensure her child could have a normal life. "I was 7 when my mom inherited Aunt Helena's research," she told the crowd. "I remember living in our car, remember the shelter waiting lists, remember being so sick and scared, and knowing my mom was even more scared even though she tried to hide it. Then everything changed. Not immediately, not easily, but it changed. Mom fought a Fortune 500 company. She testified before Congress. She built this foundation from nothing, all while working night shifts at a grocery store and making sure I had everything I needed." Lily's voice strengthened. "People ask me sometimes if I'm grateful for the inheritance, for the money and resources that changed our lives. I tell them it wasn't about money. It was about my mom looking at research that could help me and deciding that helping me meant helping everyone. Choosing to share instead of hoard. Choosing impact over comfort. That's the legacy, not the foundation's endowment or the patients we've helped, though those matter. The legacy is the choice to believe that some things are too important to be owned, too valuable to be sold, too essential to be restricted." The audience rose in applause, and Rachel felt tears streaming down her face. Her daughter understood, not just the science or the mission, but the fundamental principle that had driven both Helena and Rachel. That knowledge was meant to be shared, that healing was a right, not a commodity, that love sometimes meant making choices that looked foolish to everyone else, but that were absolutely right. After the formal celebration ended, a small group gathered in Helena's preserved laboratory. Rachel, Lily, Dr. Chun, Sandra Kwan, who'd fought the legal battles, Martin Holloway, who'd guided them through the inheritance, and a few longtime foundation researchers. They stood around Helena's desk, and Rachel pulled out a letter she'd been saving for this moment. "I wrote this to Helena on the 5th anniversary of inheriting her research," she said. "I've written to her many times over the years, but this one felt important to share." She unfolded the letter and read aloud. "Dear Helena, 5 years ago, I discovered your laboratory and learned that you'd left me something infinitely more valuable than money. You left me purpose, responsibility, and the chance to matter. I was nobody when you died. A failed researcher, a homeless mother, someone the world had already written off. You looked past all of that and saw something I couldn't see in myself, the capacity to fight for what mattered even when fighting seemed impossible. I've tried to honor that trust. The foundation is thriving. Hundreds of thousands of patients have access to treatments that didn't exist before. The open access model is spreading globally. We're proving every day that your vision was right. But I want you to know something else. You didn't just save Lily's life, though you did. You saved mine too. You gave me a reason to keep going when I'd nearly given up. You showed me that my struggle, my desperation, my fierce love for my daughter, all of it could become something meaningful instead of just painful. I was drowning when you threw me a lifeline. But it wasn't just rescue. It was invitation. An invitation to be part of something larger than myself, to contribute to human knowledge, to make the world slightly better than I found it. Thank you for that invitation. Thank you for believing I could rise to it. Thank you for refusing to let corporate greed destroy work that could help millions. You spent your final years alone, watching your mind fade, wondering if the research would survive you. I hope somehow you know it did. I hope you can see what we've built on the foundation you laid. You won. Completely, permanently. Your legacy isn't just alive, it's flourishing. With love and eternal gratitude, Rachel. She folded the letter and set it on Helena's desk, next to the Nobel Prize medal that had been permanently displayed there. In the silence that followed, Dr. Chin spoke quietly. She would be proud of all of this, but especially of you, Rachel. You took an impossible situation and transformed it through sheer determination and moral clarity. I had good help, Rachel said, looking around at the people who'd made everything possible. Sandra fighting legal battles against opponents with unlimited resources. Holloway structuring the foundation to protect its mission. Dr. Chin risking his reputation to run trials of unproven compounds. Mrs. Kowalski caring for Lily so I could fight. And Lily herself, giving me a reason to never give up. Everyone here made this happen. Helena's research was the seed, but we're all the garden where it grew. As they left the laboratory, turning off lights and securing doors, Rachel took one last look at the space that had changed her life. The equipment sat silent. The journals rested on their shelves. The refrigeration units hummed their eternal song. This room held a kind of magic, not supernatural, but the magic of human determination, of stubborn refusal to accept injustice, of love transmuted into action. Helena had worked here alone for 15 years, hiding breakthrough research from people who would suppress it, trusting that someday the right person would find it and have the courage to share it. Rachel had been that person, not because she was special or uniquely qualified, but because circumstances had left her desperate enough to risk everything and love had made her brave enough to fight. Now Lily was preparing to carry the work forward into a third generation. The research that Helena had protected, that Rachel had fought for, would continue evolving, expanding, reaching new populations and solving new problems. That was immortality, not living forever, but creating something that outlived you, that grew beyond what you could have imagined, that made the world different in ways that mattered. Rachel locked the laboratory door and climbed the stairs to the main level. Outside, the San Diego sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She stood in the courtyard where Helena's statue looked out over the facility, and she smiled. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, against powerful enemies, against every reasonable prediction of failure, they'd made accessible medical research a reality. Helena's research had reached over 2 million patients now. The Foundation's broader work had touched tens of millions more. The model was spreading to other fields, to other countries, to other areas of human knowledge that had been locked away by profit motives. A movement had been born from one woman's refusal to compromise, amplified by another woman's refusal to let that legacy die. Rachel pulled out her phone and sent a text to Lily. Heading home. Love you, scientist girl. The response came immediately. Love you too, Mom. Thanks for teaching me that some things are worth fighting for. Rachel drove home through familiar streets, past the parking lot where she'd once slept in her car with Lily curled up in the back seat, past the shelter that had had no room for them, past the grocery store where she'd worked night shifts to pay legal bills while fighting for research that would change the world. It all looked different now, not because the places had changed, but because she had. The desperate, broken woman who'd receive an unexpected phone call about an inheritance no longer existed. In her place was someone who discovered that strength came from having no choice but to be strong, that courage was just fear choosing to act anyway, that love could move mountains if you were willing to do the climbing. Her apartment, small but comfortable, felt like sanctuary. Rachel had stayed here even as the Foundation's success could have afforded something larger. She didn't need more space. She needed enough, and this was enough. On the refrigerator was a photo from Lily's first day of college. Her daughter standing in front of MIT's main building, pale skin protected by Formula X. Pink eyes bright with excitement, white blonde hair catching the sun that no longer threatened her. Normal. Her daughter got to be normal. Got to attend regular school, go to college, have friends, date, dream about a future that wasn't defined by her condition. That alone would have been enough. Worth every fight, every sacrifice, every sleepless night worrying about legal bills and corporate threats. But there was more. 2 million patients and counting. a transformed model for medical research, a movement toward accessible knowledge that was reshaping how humanity approached innovation. Helena had given her the tools. Rachel had built something extraordinary. And the best part? It was just beginning. Lily's generation would take it further, would solve problems Rachel couldn't imagine, would push the boundaries of what was possible when research served humanity instead of shareholders. Rachel sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd read Helena's first letter 7 years ago, and pulled out the journal she still kept. One final entry. Dear Helena, it's been 15 years since I found your laboratory. 15 years since you changed my life and Lily's life and the lives of millions I'll never meet. The foundation is strong. The research continues. Your legacy grows every day. But tonight, I want to tell you something simple. Thank you. Not for the research or the inheritance or the opportunity to build something meaningful. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. For trusting me when I had no reason to trust myself. For believing that a struggling single mother with nothing but love and desperation could be the guardian your life's work needed. You were right. I was enough. We all were enough. The work continues. The mission endures. Your stubborn refusal to compromise has become a movement that will outlive all of us. Rest well, brilliant, stubborn, extraordinary woman. Rest knowing you won. Completely. Forever. With love that spans the distance between your world and mine, Rachel. She closed the journal and set on the shelf next to the others, a chronicle of 15 years of fighting, building, and transforming. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new battles to fight, new opponents trying to restrict access to medical knowledge, new problems requiring solutions. But tonight, Rachel was content. She'd honored Helena's trust. She'd protected Lily. She'd built something that mattered. Some legacies are measured in wealth accumulated, others in lives touched. Helena's legacy, carried forward by Rachel and now by Lily, was measured in freedom, in children who could play in the sun, in parents who didn't have to choose between medicine and rent, in a world that was incrementally better because one woman had refused to let profit override principle. That was worth more than any fortune. That was priceless. And as Rachel prepared for bed that night, she felt something she hadn't felt in over 2 decades. Peace. Deep, settled, unshakable peace. The fight had been worth it. Every sleepless night, every terrifying court hearing, every moment of doubt and fear and desperation. Worth it. Because Lily was free. Because 2 million patients had access to treatment. Because the world had changed. Helena had started it. Rachel had fought for it. Lily would carry it forward. And somewhere, in whatever came after, Rachel liked to imagine Helena watching with satisfaction, knowing her stubborn gamble on a desperate niece had paid off beyond anything she could have hoped for. The research lived. The mission thrived. Love had won. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything. Rachel woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window, warm and bright and completely harmless. She lay there for a moment, thinking about all the mornings she'd woken in the car, frantically checking Lily for any exposure, any risk, any danger. Those days felt like a different lifetime, a different person. Her phone buzzed with messages from the foundation. A researcher in Ghana reporting breakthrough results with treating tropical skin conditions using modified photoprotective compounds. A manufacturer in Brazil confirming they'd hit their production target for the quarter, putting affordable treatment within reach of another 100,000 patients. A policymaker in Norway asking for consultation on establishing a national open-access medical research fund. The work never stopped, but it energized her now instead of exhausting her. Purpose did that. When you knew your efforts mattered, when you could see concrete results of your choices, fatigue became fuel. Lily would be home from MIT for Thanksgiving in 2 weeks. She'd promised to bring her latest research project to show Rachel, something about using artificial intelligence to accelerate drug discovery while maintaining open access principles. Her daughter was already thinking beyond what Rachel and Helena had built, already imagining the next evolution. That was how it should be. Each generation pushing further, building higher, reaching wider. Rachel made coffee and sat on her small balcony, watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, children were waking up who could go outside safely because of Formula X1. Parents were facing the day without the crushing fear that had defined Rachel's life for so many years. Researchers were working on problems they could tackle because knowledge was shared instead of hoarded. Helena's stubborn determination, multiplied by Rachel's desperate love, multiplied by Lily's generation's refusal to accept the old ways, had created waves of change that were still spreading. A car pulled into the parking lot below. A family got out, the mother carefully applying sunscreen to a pale-skinned child with white blonde hair. Albinism. Rachel recognized it immediately, but this child was laughing, excited about wherever they were going. Not afraid, not hiding, just a kid ready for an adventure. Rachel watched them walk away, the mother's hand protectively on her child's shoulder, but not desperately clutching. Cautious but not terrified, managing a condition instead of being crushed by it. That family didn't know Rachel existed, didn't know about Helena's 30 years of secret research, or the legal battles, or the choice to share instead of profit. They just knew that effective treatment was available and affordable, that their child could have a normal life. That anonymity was perfect. The best legacies didn't require recognition. They just worked, quietly improving lives, changing what was possible. Rachel finished her coffee and got ready for the day. She had a meeting with Dr. Chun about next year's research priorities, a call with Sandra about an upcoming legislative hearing, and laboratory time scheduled for the afternoon. Her own research was progressing well, work on next-generation compounds that could potentially reverse existing sun damage instead of just preventing future harm. The research never ended. There were always new problems to solve, new treatments to develop, new ways to help. But it didn't feel like burden anymore. It felt like privilege. The privilege of contributing to human knowledge. The privilege of work that mattered. The privilege of honoring Helena's trust by proving that her gamble on a desperate niece had been exactly right. Before leaving her apartment, Rachel stood in front of the refrigerator photo one more time. Lily at MIT, brilliant and confident and free. "Thank you, Helena," she whispered to the woman who'd made it all possible. "Thank you for everything." Then she grabbed her keys and headed out to continue the work that would never truly be finished, but that made every day meaningful. The foundation awaited. The research continued. The legacy grew. And Rachel Torres, who'd once had nothing but a dying car and desperate hope, walked into her day with purpose, with impact, and with the deep satisfaction of knowing she'd honored the trust of a woman she barely knew, but who'd changed her life completely. Some inheritances are measured in dollars. Helena's was measured in freedom. And Rachel had made sure that inheritance reached everyone it was meant to help. That was her victory. That was her vindication. That was her legacy, joining Helena's in a story that would continue long after both of them were forgotten. The work mattered. The patience mattered. The stubborn refusal to let profit override principle mattered. Everything else was just details. Rachel smiled as she drove toward the foundation, toward another day of research and progress and pushing boundaries. Helena would be proud. More importantly, Rachel was proud of what she'd built, who she'd become, and most of all, of the daughter who would carry it all forward into a future neither she nor Helena could have imagined. The inheritance had been money and research and legal complications. The legacy was love made visible, stubbornness made productive, and knowledge set free to serve humanity. That was worth fighting for. That was worth everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.